Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 6 of What If Naruto was in RWBY. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Words are the echo of the soul. With them, you can ignite a spark of joy or fan the flames of discord. In the heart of the tumult, Adam Taurus, with his voice resounding like thunder, demanded action and diligence. What are you doing? Move, we don't have all day. He exclaimed impatiently. The clatter of a box crashing to the ground cut through the air. Taurus, with his fixed, piercing gaze, identified the culprit, an unfortunate member of the White Fang who had stumbled in his haste. With measured, heavy steps, he approached the fallen man and, without a shred of mercy, fractured his ribs. The pain was so intense that the man gritted his teeth, suppressing a scream that threatened to escape. Get up now, commanded Taurus, his voice echoing through the confines of the warehouse. Some members of the White Fang, witnesses to the brutality, dropped their charges and approached their leader. What are you doing? Go back to work, cried Adam, but his words were lost in the void of his challenged authority. Tension grew. Adam, frustrated by the disobedience, grabbed the handle of his sword and began to draw it slowly. But at that moment, he was surprised by an unexpected hug from Sasuke. Hello, how are you, buddy? What's going on here? He asked with disconcerting calm. Let go of me, Adam demanded, his voice low and laden with menace, like the growl of a cornered beast. Sasuke, unfazed by Adam's wrath, continued in his conciliatory tone, ease up, buddy. Addressing the group, Sasuke asked, what's going on here? Mister, Adam hit one of our members. He just slipped, it was just a mistake, explained one member of the White Fang, his voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. Oh, I see, Sasuke replied, touching his chin thoughtfully. Don't worry. With a casual gesture, he pointed to a member of the group and ordered the wounded man to be taken to rest. The chosen one nodded and carefully helped the injured man away. However, before they could walk away, Adam grabbed the wounded man by the arm. Do you think I'm going to let you leave after what you did? He snapped dismissively. The wounded man, fearful, sought Sasuke's gaze, silently begging for his intervention. Sasuke, with the serenity of a mediator, interjected, he's hurt, Adam, please let him go. If it is not recovered, this work will be further hindered. His advice hung in the air, full of reason and compassion. Adam, his expression indecipherable behind the shadow of his fury, held Sasuke's gaze. Finally, he let go of the wounded man's arm abruptly and walked away, leaving behind a trail of mixed tension and relief. Sasuke, with the grace of an uncrowned leader, clapped his hands to capture everyone's attention. Well, guys, please don't worry. Mr. Adam carries a heavy burden on his shoulders, you have to understand that. He harbors no ill will towards you, he began in a calm voice, but was abruptly interrupted by the angry voice of a member of the group. No, of course not. That doesn't justify it, he exclaimed vehemently. I'm exhausted. I came from Menagerie hoping to make a difference, to support my brothers, but we are always treated just as harshly. There's no excuse for that, added another, his voice echoing with the force of truth. A chorus of assent rose among them. Taurus' rigidity was unbearable, and his treatment did not differ much from that of humans. SSSHH, guys, please lower your voice, don't make a fuss. Sasuke tried to calm things down, and succeeded. Everyone paid attention to him, seduced by the promise of his tone. Listen, I understand you're under a lot of pressure, but we have a mission to accomplish. Don't fret, I know you're exhausted and hungry. I'll go get supplies so they can regain their strength. Stay calm, he assured them. Gratitude was reflected on the faces of those present. Thank you, Mr. Sasuke. I wish you were our leader, one of them said, and many nodded in agreement. Yes, why don't you lead us? Adam is a tyrant. Why do we tolerate it? They asked. Voices were raised, unanimous in their desire for Sasuke to take the reins of the White Fang cell. With him, they felt valued and respected, and their operations always ended successfully, unlike those led by Adam, who would not hesitate to sacrifice them if the situation called for it. They were painfully aware of this reality. Please, guys, don't get carried away by rash ideas. I have no intention of undermining Adam's authority. It was chosen by you, and you must endure it to the end, Sasuke reminded them, trying to dissuade them. No, we don't have to put up with it. What if we talk to Sienna Khan about giving him a spot in the White Fang as a leader? We can advocate for you, another member fervently proposed. I think they're exaggerating, Sasuke replied, his voice tinged with a modesty that was nothing more than a facade. It was a well-rehearsed act. The words, those whispers of the soul that have the power to build or destroy, echoed in the charged air of the room. Weariness was palpable on every face, in every sigh that escaped the lips of the members of the White Fang. We're not exaggerating. Adam only orders us to act, to plan a robbery, but you are the one who really organizes it and you accompany us. He just stays in his office, and the few times he does come out it's just to yell at us and put us down. We're fed up. they said with a fatigue that transcended the physical. Sasuke, hidden behind the mask that was his shield and his mystery, sighed deeply. It was a sigh that seemed to carry with it the weight of unspoken expectations. Guys, you're going to make me blush, he said with feigned humility, touching the back of his neck in a gesture of false embarrassment. Despite the mask, his body language gave away his performance, and a wave of laughter spread between them, a brief respite in the tension of the moment. Mr. Sasuke, there is no one more capable than you, said one, his voice filled with a confidence that seemed to encourage the rest. Even if it were true that I wanted to be your leader, I don't think Sienna would accept, Sasuke replied, his tone mixing resignation with a hint of hidden desire. But of course he's going to accept if we tell him everything you've achieved and you have a lot of support. Most of us support you, insisted another, his voice heavy with hope for change. I really? Asked Sasuke, his surprise barely veiled by the mask he wore. Yes, exclaimed another, his affirmation echoing like an echo of solidarity. Well, that's fine. We're going to talk about this later, but let's finish the job first, shall we? Go back to your posts, Sasuke concluded, and as if his words were the bomb everyone needed, they returned to their duties with a renewed sense of purpose. Words are powerful, they are the breath of life and the essence of human connection. With them you can destroy, you can hurt and you can manipulate. Words are the closest thing to magic, the spell we weave into the tapestry of our lives. // Rejection echoed through the room, an echo of closed doors and denied opportunities. What's going on here? Asked RWBY, her voice tinged with confusion and curiosity. Weiss, with the clarity of someone who sees beyond appearances, replied, isn't it obvious, RWBY? These are missions meant for second and third year students. They won't allow us to undertake them. Yang, with a sigh that carried with it the heaviness of disappointment, lamented, how, I wanted to immerse myself in the thrill of hunting Grim. It was then that Naruto, with the authority of someone who knows his worth well, captured the attention of the RWBY team. So, young warriors, what challenge are you looking forward to facing as a mission? Nora, with the innocence of one who knows no bounds, suggested, how about we go into the darkness to exterminate Grim? Blake, with the wisdom of one who has read 1,000 endings in the pages of countless books, warned, fools, that feat is not within our reach. It's a privilege reserved for sophomores. But then, like a ray of light in the gloom, the word, open double angle bracket accepted, illuminated their hopes. Team RWBY, united in amazement and excitement, rushed towards Naruto. Naruto, how did you accomplish such a feat? Exclaimed RWBY, her voice a song of incredulity and admiration. Naruto, with the confidence of one who has been touched by fortune, replied, what can I say, my dear companions? The director, in his wisdom, has recognized the brilliance of talent. With that, I say goodbye. Weiss, with the determination of one who seeks the truth behind the curtains of the theater, stopped Naruto. No, 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 she insisted, holding him firmly. What trick have you used? Nothing out of the ordinary, Naruto replied with a smile that hid more than it revealed. Weiss, with the insight of one who knows the intricacies of the human soul, was not deceived. No, no, I know your tricks. There's always a mystery behind your actions, he said with a scrutiny that defied any attempt at concealment. Naruto, with the mischievousness of a cunning fox, joked, you know me so well, Weiss. Sometimes, in the recesses of my mind, I imagine that we are bound together by bonds stronger than camaraderie. Weiss, surprised and disarmed by the insinuation, stammered, what, Naruto. Relax, I was just joking with you. The truth is, I spoke with the vice principal, and she considered that maybe she could entrust me with a more significant mission. And so, they accepted. So, surprise, teammates. Sometimes, the key is to raise your voice and be heard, Naruto revealed with a triumphant smile. And as he walked away from the assignment room, he stopped and reflected, you know what? You also possess extraordinary abilities. It's absurd that you're limited to lesser missions. Join me. Let's talk to the director. Perhaps, for you, he'll be willing to bend the rules. With these words, Naruto extended an invitation to challenge the status quo, to seek together a greater destiny, a path that would lead them to the greatness they deserved. RWBY's gratitude overflowed like a river in spring, her embrace of Naruto a sweet testament to her effusive appreciation. There's no need to thank me. It has been an honor to help, Naruto replied with the grace of one who has done a good deed. Shit, yes, Yang and Nora's joy was contagious, their hands met in a triumphant clash, celebrating the promise of adventure that awaited them. Our mission begins at dawn, Naruto announced with the serenity of a warrior before the battle. Get your saddlebags ready, brave comrades. The team responded with a unison shout, a confirmation of their willingness and courage. RWBY's expression, however, was tinged with sweet melancholy. What a fortune of yours, Naruto. Our mission doesn't set sail for another 3 days. Do not envy the wind that blows in my favor, RWBY. This twist of fate is also a blessing for you. Upon my return, perhaps I'll share with you the pearls of wisdom gathered on my journey, Naruto consoled, his voice a balm for RWBY's disheartenment. They moved together in complicit silence towards their quarters, each step a prelude to the stories yet to be written. In the privacy of his mind, Naruto heard Kurama's voice, a murmur of suspicion and curiosity. Doesn't all this seem strange to you? Inquired the nine-tailed fox. Of course, it does. Although I mentioned it in jest, the acceptance was surprisingly quick. Ozpin shows blatant favoritism towards Team RWBY, Naruto reflected, his mind a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Don't you intend to investigate further? To discover the truth? Challenged Kurama, his tone a challenge to Naruto's inquisitive spirit. And why should I? It's none of my business, Naruto replied, though a spark of curiosity burned within him. Of course, it's not your problem, but curiosity is a fire that burns in you, smiled Kurama, aware of Naruto's inquisitive nature. It's true, curiosity gnaws at me, but that doesn't mean I should meddle. Although I can't deny that it's highly suspicious, Naruto admitted, his thoughts a reflection of his internal conflict. Kurama laughed with delight, knowing that Naruto couldn't resist the temptation of a mystery. First, there was the incident at the docks, then the altercation with the Atlesian paladin. Any other student would have been expelled from the academy long ago. Yang came close, but not because of the incident itself, but because her aura was blocked, preventing her from facing the Grim as an ordinary civilian. And now, this favoritism could be linked to Ozpin having been a mentor to Team STRQ, speculated Naruto. It's plausible. Summer Rose, RWBY's progenitor and former leader of STRQ, left a legacy of mysteries. But why such magnanimity with Team RWBY? Unless, like you, Naruto, they are pieces of a chess game yet to be revealed, tools forged for a future purpose, mused Kurama, his tone a murmur of conjecture. Perhaps Ozpin merely aspires to shape them into heroines, figures of legend and hope, suggested Naruto, his voice a thread of optimism in the fabric of doubts. Yet, you, with your feats and skills, eclipse your peers. Why aren't you the favored one? In Ozpin's eyes, you seem to be just another student, questioned Kurama, his inquiry an echo of the perceived injustice. They favor me, in my own way. I have achieved much here on my own merit. The trust of the teachers, the outstanding grades, my skills. All are the fruits of my effort. But Team RWBY. They do not stand out in the same way. They get wrapped up in trouble and yet emerge unscathed. It's an enigma, Naruto admitted, his tone one of acknowledgement of his own achievements and the anomalies surrounding his companions. Something murky stirs in the shadows of the Veil Kingdom. The dust thefts, the disappearance of the White Fang. Where have they vanished to? And then there's General Ironwood's arsenal. Though I'm not opposed to caution, this surplus of weaponry is alarming. It's as if they anticipate an invasion. And most unsettling of all, that strange pulse of energy throbbing beneath beacon, revealed Kurama, his voice a harbinger of storms to come. Naruto, with a countenance as grave as the sky before a storm, walks towards his sanctuary of solitude. His comrades, witnesses to his gravity, opt for silence, a tacit pact of respect for his ruminations. We will discuss this enigma after the mission, he declares with a voice carrying the weight of determination. If the shadow of threat looms over RWBY or our allies, I will not hesitate to unsheathe my sword to protect them. The bullheads, the ships that would transport the students to their assigned destinations, were beginning to land softly on the ground. The excitement was palpable among the crowd of young men who, like Naruto, were about to embark on their missions. Anticipation was mixed with a hint of nervousness. After all, they wouldn't meet their mentor until the very day of the mission's start. Naruto, with his usual air of confidence, addressed his companions. Are you ready? He asked, making sure that nothing essential was missing for the adventure that awaited them. Yes, we have everything we need, Pyrrha replied, though she couldn't help but cast an inquisitive glance at Naruto's luggage. But what about you? It seems that you have brought quite a bit. Naruto followed his gaze to the three huge suitcases beside him. It's just precaution, he said with a nonchalant smile. Pyrrha frowned slightly. Don't you think a little excessive? On missions like this, you can never be too prepared, Naruto replied, his tone serious for a moment. Pyrrha sighed, resigned. She was used to this level of preparation, almost bordering on her leader's paranoia. It was then that Nora, unable to contain her excitement, interrupted. Naruto, what do we know about our mission? Grimm's extermination, Naruto replied, though details are scarce. Nora nodded, her energy barely contained, like a spring ready to be unleashed at any moment. It was in that moment of tense calm that an unfamiliar voice rang out. Are you the NNPR team? Everyone turned to find the source of the question. A man of imposing presence, with black hair dotted with gray and reddish eyes, approached. His red cloak, worn by countless battles, fluttered behind him. He dressed elegantly, Despite the informality of his demeanor, and the rings that adorned his fingers and the cross-shaped pendant that hung from his neck did not go unnoticed. "Hello, boys," he said with a crooked smile, raising a canteen to his lips and taking a long swig. The students exchanged looks of bewilderment. "Let's put aside the formalities. I'm Q. Hero Bronwyn," Naruto interrupted, recognizing him instantly. "So you will be our guide." Hiro assessed Naruto with a sharp gaze, his brow slightly furrowed into an expression of analysis. "Interesting," the blonde murmured. "The legendary Hero Bronwyn will guide us." "Is flattering, I guess," Naruto said, his voice tinged with feigned boredom. Hiro smiled at the young man's response. "So you know me, boy?" "Anyone who bothers to search will find your name on the net," Naruto replied with a shrug, his casual tone belipping his curiosity about the man who would lead them on their next mission. Hiro's smile widened at Naruto's response. "So you've been researching me, boy?" His tone was one of fun mixed with a touch of respect. Naruto nodded confidently. Of course, why wouldn't he? His team has been the most prominent in Beacon, across all generations. And my goal is to surpass that mark. His voice carried the weight of an unspoken challenge, a promise of future greatness. Hiro watched him in silence, his gaze piercing and evaluating. Naruto felt a twinge of nervousness under that intense scrutiny, but he stood his ground. "Is there anything that worries you, sir?" asked Naruto, trying to diffuse the tension. "No, nothing," Hiro replied nonchalantly, turning on his heel and walking toward the bullhead. "But before I leave, I will inform you about our mission. It's about the extermination of Grim who has been ravaging a border town called Brennan's Hers." "Really?" exclaimed Naruto, his interest clearly piqued. "That's great." Hiro stopped and looked over his shoulder. "And why do you think it's cool?" "I have spent some time there during my travels. I know the place pretty well." Naruto explained. His knowledge of the terrain gave him a tactical advantage that he hoped to exploit. Hiro nodded slowly. "Well, that's the mission. There's nothing complicated about it," he said, though his tone suggested that appearances could be deceiving. Naruto's frown was marked with concern. "Shouldn't we have specific guidelines to follow, sir?" he asked, seeking clarity on his mission. "Nothing in particular," Hiro replied in a nonchalant tone, taking another sip from his canteen. "It is a simple question of extermination. We're not here to play bodyguards for politicians. Our work may be harder, but it's definitely more direct." Naruto approached, his countenance reflecting seriousness. "A gentleman's advice, sir, too much alcohol is harmful to health," he warned respectfully. Hiro's gaze mingled with surprise and a hint of annoyance. "You're not in a position to give me orders, young man." "You're right," Naruto agreed, showing the canteen he'd stolen from Hiro. Hiro's look of bewilderment was evident. At what point had his drink disappeared? "As long as you command this mission, I will obey your orders," Naruto said with conviction. "But I need it to be in optimal condition. And as long as I'm around, I won't tolerate your consuming alcohol." His voice was firm, and his eyes flashed with the determination of a natural leader. With a determined step, Naruto made his way towards the bullhead. Hiro, frowning more than ever, muttered under his breath, "I barely know him and he drives me crazy. He's just as irritating as that one." Upon boarding the bullhead, Naruto was met with a pleasant surprise. John and his team were there, as well as Miss Fall's team. "John, what a pleasant coincidence. Do you also begin your mission today?" Naruto asked with a smile. "That's right," John replied, glancing furtively at Cinder. Accompanying the two teams were Professor Port and a teacher from Atlas Academy, who would serve as guides. "Ha ha ha, Mr. Uzumaki, young people, come up. Today we are embarking on a great adventure," exclaimed Port with a contagious laugh. //. Just 5 minutes after the bullhead took off, the atmosphere was already one of pure fun. Naruto felt completely at ease, enjoying the murmur of conversations among his friends. I watched, not without a hint of amusement, as John tried, unsuccessfully, to start a dialogue with Cinder. Normally, John was an open book, but in front of her, he was reduced to a fearful puppy. "John," Flint called, catching his attention. "Yes, yes, yes," John replied resignedly, extending his right hand. Flint placed handcuffs on him, prompting murmurs from the crowd. The situation became even more curious when Flint handcuffed himself to the other end of the 4-meter chain. "What does this mean?" asked Naruto, his tone betraying his amusement. "It's a precautionary measure," Neon explained, his look complicated. "Caution. Why?" Ren asked, as intrigued as Naruto. "Friend Penny, could you explain to me what's going on?" Naruto turned to Penny, waiting for an explanation. Knowing his willingness to respond, Penny was quick to satisfy his curiosity. "John has a knack for finding himself in trouble when he's alone. It's almost like I defy the laws of probability." Flint, with an anguished expression, added, "You have no idea what a mess he's gotten himself into. He's incredibly impressionable. Did you know that he even got married once? The revelation blew everyone's mind, including Kiro, who was now listening with interest. Really, boy? He asked, incredulous. Yes, Flint continued, after surviving his second mission, we decided to celebrate. We ended up at a bar in Atlas. And well, what happened next is history. We drank, we had fun, and suddenly, John disappeared. We didn't hear from him until the next morning, when he called us, hysterical, telling us he was married. The silence that followed was absolute, everyone processing the absurd story they had just heard. Cinder's laughter broke the tension like a ray of sunshine through the clouds. Unbelievable, John. You've always had a knack for attracting chaos, but this is a masterpiece of improbability. How did you manage to outdo yourself? He said, his smile lighting up his face with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. John, with a smile that reflected his resignation to his reputation as a trouble seeker, responded with a simplicity that bordered on comedy. I don't have the faintest idea. It seems like the problems are looking for me, not the other way around. Cinder, still smiling, pressed for more details. But tell us, how did you manage to get rid of that unexpected commitment? The same way I got into it. John replied with a mischievous smile. Cinder let out another laugh, her disbelief evident. I can't believe it. It's the truth. I got her drunk and we got an express divorce, John explained, prompting another wave of laughter from the crowd. The trip continued in an atmosphere of camaraderie and humor. John and Cinder, destined for a joint mission, stood behind, contemplating the road ahead. John was tasked with protecting a mayor in a quaint town, while Cinder would take on a role in the local police force. Their collaboration was inevitable, a duet forged by fate and circumstance. Get ready, we've arrived, Hiro announced, his voice cutting through the air with authority. Everyone nodded, their movements reflecting a tacit understanding of the seriousness of their mission. The bullhead descended gently, like a leaf blown by the wind, to the ground that would soon be the scene of his bravery. The students, heroes in the making, gathered their belongings with a mixture of anxiety and determination. The land that greeted them was a tapestry of stories yet to be woven, and they were about to add their own threads to the plot. Brats, Hiro muttered in a tone of boredom and exasperation that echoed in the air, his desire for a spirit unsatisfied on the long journey. Let us pause our journey and find an inn to rest during the days of this mission. Hiro's proposal was like a spark that ignited the action, and everyone set out to seek shelter. However, Naruto, with a determined gesture, stopped the group's advance. Before I go any further, there's someone I need to visit, someone I haven't seen in a while. Of course, they replied in unison, though Hiro resisted. No, brat, we must first find an inn to stay in. Naruto, with the confidence that came from knowledge of the place, replied, let me take care of it, it won't be difficult to find a suitable inn, I know many in this area. At Naruto's insistence, Hiro could only breathe a resigned sigh and nod. The town was a portrait of everyday life, with its cobblestone streets, modestly erected wooden and concrete houses, and scattered parks that dotted the landscape with green. To Ren, it was an echo of his lost home, a whisper of memories around every corner. We've arrived, Naruto announced, pointing to an inn that seemed to embrace the stories of those crossing its threshold. So the person you wanted to visit owns an inn? Asked Ren curiously. Upon entering, they were greeted by the imposing presence of a black-bearded gentleman, whose corpulence was only surpassed by the warmth of his smile at the sight of Naruto. Jojo, boy, how long it has been no see. He exclaimed cheerfully. Carlos, how have you been? It's been an eternity, Naruto replied, his stature now eclipsing the man who once seemed like a giant to him. Time had woven its history into both, changing far more than just their heights. Boy, the old man said, patting Naruto on the back. To what do I owe the honor of your visit? I'm here on a mission, Naruto revealed. A mission, repeated Charles, his confusion dispelled by the light of pride. Yes, I've been accepted into Beacon, Naruto announced, his voice full of accomplishments and dreams. Congratulations, my boy, cried Charles, his congratulations echoing through the walls of the inn. Thank you. And now, I need a place to stay for a few days. Don't worry, this is your home as much as mine, Carlos said generously. Thank you very much, Carlos, Naruto thanked, just as a female voice interrupted the calm. Love, what's all this fuss? The question was accompanied by a middle-aged woman, whose smile was as radiant as the morning sun. As he laid eyes on Naruto, his joy overflowed into a hug that spoke of years of affection. Oh, my dear boy, how have you been? It's been a long time, Martha, Naruto said, his smile a reflection of the bonds they have rediscovered. So you're looking for an inn? Asked Marta with a mixture of surprise and hospitality. It's going to be a short stay, we're just here to exterminate some Grims, Naruto explained, his voice calm and confident. Marta frowned, worry streaming across her face. But, Naruto, isn't that an assignment for third-year students? She asked, her tone revealing the restlessness of a motherly heart. There's no reason to be alarmed, Naruto said, nodding at Kiro. We have a teacher who will guide us and protect us from any danger. Marta nodded slowly, her trust in Naruto as firm as ever. Okay, I trust you. After all, you are the hero who saved us, he said with an affection that transcended words. Naruto smiled, his humility shining through his gesture. You don't need to remind me all the time, I did it with pleasure. Curiosity flashed in Nora's eyes, and she couldn't help asking, what are they talking about? Marta took a deep breath, her gaze lost in memories. Once upon a time, this place was besieged by thieves, former members of the Bronwyn tribe. They plundered and exacted exorbitant tribute. Until Naruto came along, he said, his smile reflecting the gratitude of the entire village. And he drove them out of here. Naruto blushed slightly at the tale, while his friends shared knowing smiles. Beyond his nonchalance, Naruto was a noble soul, always willing to extend his hand to those in need. Carlos interrupted the moment with a practical tone. Here are the keys. They will have 3 bedrooms, they will be accommodated in pairs. Naruto nodded with a smile of sincere appreciation upon receiving the keys. The same old room? He asked in a light tone, waiting for the affirmative answer. Of course, replied Carlos, his voice imbued with a familiarity and respect that spoke of the trust forged over time. Okay, here you go, Ren, Naruto said, throwing a wrench into the air that Ren caught nimbly. You will share with Nora, and I with Pira. And Kiro, Naruto continued, throwing another key at him, you will have your personal sanctuary. Kiro let out a hoarse laugh, his voice echoing with a mocking tone. Like there's some other option, brat. The calm was broken when Pira raised her voice, a note of panic in her tone. Wait, Naruto, we can't share a room, he exclaimed, stopping Naruto in his tracks. Naruto turned to her, a playful smile adorning his face. Why is that? He asked curiously, his smile widening at Pira's apparent shyness. Pira looked away, her voice a whisper that barely managed to hide her nervousness. Not that I think you'd do anything wrong, but it would be awkward, extremely uncomfortable, he admitted, his confession barely audible in the tension-laden air. Naruto put a hand to the back of his head, his smile disappearing as an expression of understanding crossed his face. I understand, he said softly. Then how about you sleep with Ren and I sleep with Nora? The suggestion was met with a cry of horror from Ren. That would be even worse. He exclaimed, his voice rising in protest. Naruto stretched out his arms in a dramatic gesture, as if he were performing on stage. Come on, guys, they're putting me between a rock and a hard place. What am I supposed to do? Ren frowned, his determination clear in his expression. Then you will sleep with me, he declared firmly. Naruto recoiled, his expression one of feigned scandal. I'm sorry, my friend, but even I have my limits. Don't get me wrong, you're a good-looking guy, but I prefer the sweetness of papaya, not the astringency of eggplant, Naruto joked, covering his hands in a theatrical gesture as he walked away from Ren. Ren couldn't contain his frustration and lunged at Naruto, initiating a battle. // Come on, Ren, it was just a joke. Of course I'll share a room with you. Why was I going to sleep with one of my classmates? That would be completely inappropriate. I just wanted to make you a little uncomfortable, Naruto said to mocking and provocative laughter. Ren snorted, his irritation evident. You're a complete idiot, he replied in a tone of disgust. Changing the subject, Naruto addressed the 2 men present. By the way, where's Naira? He asked curiously. He went to get provisions. He'll be back soon, Carlos replied calmly. Then, for now, we're going to settle into the rooms, Hiro announced authoritatively. The young men made their way to their respective rooms. Ren and Naruto began to unpack. Naruto lay on his bed, fiddling with a necklace in his right hand. The green gem hanging from it shone brightly, its beauty was mesmerizing. In another room, Nora and Pira did the same, quietly unpacking their belongings. Meanwhile, Hiro sat alone, staring out the window. His hands trembled slightly, a sign of his internal struggle with alcohol withdrawal. Suddenly, a call from the floor below broke the silence. They descended the stairs, and Naruto, the last in line, set foot on the top step just as Naira appeared before them. Naira, with her light brown hair pulled back in a ponytail that fell over her left shoulder, was the embodiment of grace. Her hair, soft and shiny, looked like a river of liquid chocolate cascading onto the fabric of her dress. His eyes, of a deep, luminous green, sparkled with the vivacity of fireflies dancing in the darkness of a summer night, lighting the way of dreamers. The freckles that adorned her cheeks were like tiny islands of enchantment, scattered over a sea of soft skin, adding a touch of youthful innocence to her face. Her outfit, pure and ethereal white, brushed her ankles with every movement, flowing around her like a cloud made into a dress. The fabric, thin and light, played with the breeze, creating an aura of mysticism around it. His smile, pearly and serene, was the reflection of a peaceful soul, a smile that spoke of pure and innocent dreams, of hopes and desires unsullied by the harshness of the world. It was a smile that could calm the fiercest storms, that could bring peace to the most turbulent heart. She walked with an elegance that defied gravity, every step a poem, every gesture a song. The light seemed to play in her surroundings, creating golden halos that enveloped her as if she were an ancient deity, an eternal, immaculate presence in an ever-changing world. His presence was a balm for tired eyes, a vision of what could be if the world stopped for a moment to breathe beauty in its purest form. Naira was, in essence, a living memory of times gone by, a promise of what could still be. In her, eternity found a face, innocence a sanctuary. It was as if nature itself had decided to take human form, not to flaunt its power, but to remind us of the simplicity of being, the purity of existence without the complications that we mortals usually weave around our lives. Seeing her, he couldn't help but smile with joy, although she didn't seem to recognize him right away. However, he quickly walked over and wrapped her in a warm, effusive embrace, lifting her into the air as if she were a little girl, twirling with her in a whirlwind of laughter. As he lowered her, he hugged her again. Naira, how have you been? It's been so long, he exclaimed with a smile that lit up his face. She, surprised at first, soon recognized his voice. And Naruto. He muttered with a mixture of disbelief and glee. With a smile that almost split his face in two, Naruto spoke sweetly. How have you been? I see you changed, even more beautiful than I remembered. She, blushing slightly, took his face in her hands, gently caressing the distinctive marks on her skin. You've changed too. You've become very handsome, he said in a voice that exuded affection. And you're still as charming as ever. Your voice. I've missed her so much, he confessed, his tone full of nostalgia. She let go of his face and began to explore his chest and arms with a dreamy look. Wow, you've grown a lot in your muscles. They have become stronger, he said admiringly. Thank you, he replied with a humble smile. I used to be much shorter than you, but now I beat you by almost 2 heads. She then hugged him tightly, breathing deeply, as if trying to memorize his essence. I've missed you so much. Where have you been all this time? He asked in a whisper full of emotion. I have so many stories to tell you, Naira, he said, returning the embrace tenderly and stroking her hair gently. The scene was sweet, almost to the point of cloying. They whispered in each other's ears, sharing secrets and smiles that reflected genuine joy. Pira, watching from the side, couldn't hide her annoyance. Although he understood Naruto's affection for Naira, the closeness between them was uncomfortable. He interrupted the scene with a forced cough. Ahem, Naruto, you should give him some space, he said with a warning tone. Why? He asked, his innocence apparent in his voice. Naruto, stay away from my daughter now, Naira's father interjected in a low but firm voice. But we're not doing anything wrong, he began, but Naira, realizing the situation, slowly pulled away, her face tinged a deep red. I'm sorry, Naruto, I think I overdid it, she murmured, her voice trembling. You don't have to apologize, he said with a comforting smile, brushing it off as if it were unimportant. Naruto gently hugged her shoulders and led her to his team. Come, I want you to meet my friends. There's so much I want to share with you. Naruto had always considered that luck smiled on him when he had such exciting missions. Unlike others who might have ended up in monotonous jobs, his skills had made him a favorite of many. However, there was something about the educational system in his world that did not convince him, the indulgence towards students. In a place besieged by monsters and constant threats, I would expect the demand to be greater. Although he was not opposed to a certain indulgence, after all, children deserve a happy childhood. In this world plagued by beasts, laxity had no place. So when the test to enter Beacon turned out to be just crossing a forest, it seemed absurd to him, especially compared to the rigorous ninja exams he'd faced. Walking through a forest was nothing to him. His only option was to voice his discontent, but he also decided that his team would not rely on luck like so many others in Remnant's history. He would train them to be exceptional, even if they resisted at first. Naruto felt frustration growing inside him, but he understood that they were not used to such rigor. Reluctantly, he relented. Minimizing the situation brought with it a worrisome complacency that even the fox perceived. Naruto had begun to relax, worrying more about his friends than training. It wasn't a bad thing per se, but he wasn't like everyone else. He was a ninja, and that attitude could have long-term consequences for Naruto Uzumaki. The complacency he had tolerated might, one day, turn against him. At the dining room table, Naruto was watching his companions and broke the silence. We're going to start this mission. Tell me more, Hiro. Hiro replied listlessly, north of here is a group of Grims. We'll go and eliminate them. Naruto, with a serious expression, sighed and spread out a map on the table. If the Grims are to the north, they must cross the forest to get here. Then, Ren, You will do the reconnaissance. Pyrrha, remote support. Pyrrha nodded. Nora, you'll be our gunner. Nora nodded too. And I'll act as a decoy. The others nodded, accepting their roles. Naruto's determination to become the decoy left Hiro perplexed, not by the strategy itself, but by the young man's willingness to risk his own safety. Well, if you're all set, Hiro conceded with a nonchalant turn, then let's go. But Naruto raised a hand, stopping Hiro and the rest of the team. Wait, he said seriously, first of all, are you sure you're ready? The companions exchanged confused glances. What do you mean? They asked in unison. I want to know how much ammo you have, Naruto asked, his tone indicating that it was not a mere formality. Our reserve is sufficient, Nora replied with contagious optimism. Yes, but enough is an ambiguous word. Have you considered how difficult it is now to get dust after the price hike? Asked Naruto, his question hanging in the air like a sword of Damocles. The faces of his companions reflected the complication of the situation. So, how many cartridges do you have exactly? Insisted Naruto. Hiro interjected, I think we'll have what it takes for combat. Naruto nodded slowly. I expected so. These missions are designed to test our skills, and as you've seen, previous teams came back exhausted and worn out. As a leader, it's my responsibility to minimize any damage and ensure we come back in optimal condition. Naruto let his words settle before continuing. He walked over to 3 suitcases and opened them, revealing their contents to everyone. Inside, an arsenal of weapons was waiting to be discovered. Naruto pulled one out and placed it on the table. A Walther P99AS. Common. Maybe, he said, but effective. He set it down on the table with a deliberate gesture. The M24 shotgun. Although, forget that, we're not here to hunt, he said sarcastically, and placed it next to the gun. And here we have the FNFS 2000. Awesome, isn't it? He placed it carefully, attracting everyone's gaze, especially Nora's, whose eyes shone with interest. The 40mm MILKORMGL airsoft grenade launcher, useful in any situation. Especially the violent ones, Naruto said, a playful smile poking across his lips as he added it to the collection. And finally, the M134. I nickname him, the Dismemberer, capable of shattering any structure that stands in the way. Pyrrha's voice trembled as she asked, and Naruto, where did you get all these weapons? Before he could answer, Hiro interrupted, I've handled a lot of guns in my life, but I've never seen anything like this. Naruto smiled proudly. They are my inventions, inspired by the ingenuity of other weapons, which makes them unique pieces. Hiro, with a look of astonishment, mused quietly, Ozpin was right to say that you were a prodigy, 1 in 100 million. This is really impressive. It's remarkable, no doubt, Hiro admitted, his curiosity piqued, but how does this solve our shortage of ammunition? With a theatrical gesture, Naruto pulled a small jar from his pocket and accurately tossed it to Hiro, who caught it on the fly and examined it closely. Inside, a black powder settled at the bottom of the glass. What is this? He asked. Gunpowder, Naruto replied simply. The others exchanged puzzled looks. Gunpowder, they repeated, their confusion evident. Yes, it's an artifact from the past, not very common these days. A Mistral scientist once created an explosive from potassium nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur, Naruto explained, his voice charged with respect for ancient knowledge. Hiro frowned, and that's enough to take the Grims against them. Of course, Naruto said confidently. Gunpowder may not be as versatile as dust, but in terms of projectiles, it's more than capable of penetrating the Grimm's bone armor. Naruto then showed a golden bullet, its glow capturing the light of the room. And these are the munitions of designed. Curiosity filled the eyes of his companions, none of whom had ever seen such a component before. Naruto advanced towards the exit, and his companions followed silently. They were heading north, into the thick forest that promised danger and challenge. However, just before Naruto resumed his march, something caught his attention. A sign on the side of the road showed the face of a young woman with the word, missing, written in large, gloomy letters. Curiosity flashed in Naruto's eyes, but with a sigh, he decided that it was not the time for distractions. The mission required all his concentration. The sign fluttered lightly in the breeze, as if whispering a mystery known only to the wind. The image of the missing girl seemed to stare back at them with a silent plea, an untold story fading into the morning air. Naruto felt a brief flash of sympathy, but the urgency of his task pushed him forward. Responsibility weighed on his shoulders like an invisible cloak, reminding him that every second counted. The team continued on their way, Naruto's boots leaving firm footprints on the dusty ground. The sun was beginning to rise in the sky, bathing the world in warm, golden hues. In the distance, the forest loomed like a sleeping giant, its tall, dark trees forming an impenetrable wall that dared travelers to enter. With each step, the tension grew. The sounds of the forest, normally soothing, now seemed full of foreboding. The rustling of a branch, the rustling of leaves, the distant song of a bird, everything contributed to the symphony of a nature that concealed both beauty and danger. Slash dash slash. Naruto executed a precise slash on a Goliath's head, its blade impregnated with the chakra of the wind, slicing through the Grimm's breastplate with unearthly ease. 13. Nora said, as her sledgehammer slammed into another enemy's skull. A Grimm crept up from behind, but was quickly felled by a well-aimed projectile. Ren and Pyrrha, hidden among the fronds, provided life support from a distance. I've got 13 kills, Naruto. Nora proclaimed, her voice rumbling defiantly as her sledgehammer descended on the fractured head of another bold Grimm. Naruto, with a smile on his lips, spun around, decapitating an Ursa with a fluid movement. It's not a competition, Nora, he replied, but if it were, I'd have 24. Nora's frown only foreshadowed an even fiercer offensive on her part. If it wasn't for Naruto, I'd be worried about her, Ren remarked, firing another shot that found its target in a distant Ursa. These weapons are formidable, Pyrrha added, admiring the effectiveness of their arsenal. At the rate we're going, we'll finish tomorrow, Ren said, watching his opponents dwindle. The mayor was a little peculiar, he continued, recalling the treatment he received. A complete idiot, Pyrrha interjected, her language reflecting the mayor's lack of courtesy. Her attitude had been strange, almost as if she didn't want them to be there, but they decided not to care. That sword cuts like no other, Pyrrha observed, admiring Naruto's weapon. I wonder what that hissing sound it sometimes makes, Ren mused, intrigued by the peculiar sound that accompanied the blade's every movement. Naruto, in an act of dexterity, blocked a Beowulf's attack and repelled it with a powerful shove. He threw his katana like a dart, impaling the stunned Grimm by the neck. Without giving him time to recover, he rushed to the beast, retrieved his sword, and snapped it in two, from the neck down. With a hand signal, Naruto signaled to Pyrrha and Ren that it was time to relieve Nora, who was showing signs of fatigue. We'll have to replace her soon, who's going to go? Asked Pyrrha. You go, Ren suggested. Of all of us, I'm the one with the least resistance. But how come Naruto has so much energy? He wondered aloud, marveling at his leader's inexhaustible vitality. Pyrrha nodded, sharing the same curiosity. They had never seen Naruto exhausted, except for the time he fainted, but never during combat or training. His endurance seemed to defy human limits, an enigma that added even more mystery to his already impressive figure. Hours after the battle, Naruto allowed himself a satisfied smile. Despite the fatigue that crept in his companions, it was evident that they still had reserves of energy, the rigorous training he had subjected them to had paid off. Yes, tomorrow we'll finish this task, exclaimed Nora, her voice vibrating with enthusiasm. However, Pyrrha expressed a concern that hung in the air, aren't you worried that the Grimms might lay siege to the village during the night? Naruto, with the calmness of someone with an ace up his sleeve, replied, there is no reason to be alarmed. I've set traps. They won't even come close to our borders. Intrigued, Pyrrha inquired, what kind of traps have you set up? With a discreet gesture, Naruto patted the seal in his pocket, assuring, these are security measures that I have designed, don't worry. Slash dash slash. In a cozy restaurant, a group of friends were celebrating a day full of accomplishments. The conversation flowed with the lightness of the everyday, wandering between trivialities and future dreams. And for that reason, Naruto, I need you to give me the grenade launcher, Nora pleaded with a mixture of seriousness and playfulness. Naruto, the Uzumaki, took a sip of his juice, contemplating the request with a silent refusal. Please, she insisted, and he shook his head again. Please, Nora repeated, her eyes shining with innocent pleading, her face imitating that of a helpless puppy. Naruto tried to resist, but to no avail. He didn't understand why, but indulging his friend's desires had become a daily routine, especially when it came to Nora and Pyrrha. I just couldn't deny them anything. It's all right, Nora. It's all yours. He finally relented. Yes, she exclaimed, her joy echoing in the air. Naruto was smiling inwardly. To see her happy was his discreet delight. However, his attention was diverted when a close conversation captured his interest. I'm serious, a voice came from another table. Are you serious? I can't believe it, replied another, incredulous. I'm serious, Ishval has disappeared, as if the earth had swallowed him. That's crazy, man. And it wasn't a Grimm attack. Are you serious? Yes, there is no structure left, no foundation, it pretty much vanished. What happened? I don't know, man, maybe it never existed. That's absurd, I went there all the time. Naruto turned his gaze to his companions. Guys, you saw the posters, didn't you? Yes, replied Pyrrha with a grave expression. 5 girls have disappeared. Ren sighed, but his smile was evident. You want to help, don't you? Yes, Naruto said with a determined smile. Let's go to the police right now to see if they'll let us investigate this. Yes. Nora shouted excitedly, we have another mission. Yes. Ren seemed less animated. Although he was willing to help, the extra work wasn't his thing. //. In the dim light of the police station, an exhausted officer looked up from his mountain of papers. The shadows of fatigue were drawn under his eyes, witnesses to the weight of countless hours spent on a case that seemed to consume him. What do you want, young people? He asked in a voice that betrayed the weariness of his soul. Let me introduce myself. I'm Naruto Uzumaki and he's my mentor, Hiro Bronwyn, Naruto said with a respect that contrasted with his youthful energy. Well? The officer asked, his tone tinged with resignation. We are apprentice hunters and he is an accomplished hunter. We have come to offer our support in this investigation. Naruto explained, as the officer raised an eyebrow in skepticism. I don't need any more people here, please get out, the officer replied firmly. Listen, sir, Naruto interjected, his voice carrying the determination of someone who won't take no for an answer. You are visibly exhausted and any help is valuable right now. We have come to ask for special permission to collaborate, but if he does not grant it, we will find a way to act anyway. The officer sighed, a silent surrender to the persistence of the young men. Hunters always think they are above everything. Go ahead, come in, he finally conceded, making way for the sanctuary of archives and documents. The office was almost deserted, reflecting the smallness of the town. The officer handed them a series of files worn out by use. These are the reports of the missing persons, study them. The young people immersed themselves in reading, passing the sheets from hand to hand, their faces illuminated by the light of determination. We'll investigate, we'll search every corner as long as time allows, Naruto declared, and everyone nodded in tacit agreement. There's nothing useful here, Hiro muttered, his voice a whisper of frustration. We have enough, I think, Naruto said, his eyes narrowing, scrutinizing the printed words. They're all between 18 and 20 years old and share the same date of birth, September 20th. The revelation left everyone open-mouthed. It was a detail that had gone unnoticed until that moment. Naruto sighed, aware of the insignificance of that piece of information without a broader context. Let's get out of here, he proposed, his voice carrying an echo of decision. As they left the police station, Naruto couldn't ignore the inquisitive gaze of one of the officers. There was something about the tension in his posture that was familiar. He recalled the times when he mentioned the disappearances in the streets, he noticed how some residents became nervous. I was beginning to suspect that there was more than a single culprit behind all this, maybe a network of civilians and the odd corrupt official. Even the mayor, whose cold sweat had not gone unnoticed by the shrewd Uzumaki, seemed to want to get rid of them as soon as possible. Come on, guys, we must conclude our mission tomorrow, Naruto said, leading the way into the unknown. //. The next day he maintained the same tone of excellence, if I may say so. The Grimms were defeated so quickly that, by the time the sun reached its zenith, the group was resting in a clearing in the forest. There, in the serenity of the place, they were just sitting, enjoying the well-deserved rest, while Naira approached, carrying food for everyone. Ren, Nora, and Pira were nestled on a blanket of grass, while Naruto lay under the protective shade of a tree, lying on Naira's lap. With gestures of tenderness, she stroked his hair, drawing a smile on his face. A pleasant conversation flowed between them, punctuated by laughter that spread until it reached the group of friends. Pira, with a mixture of frustration and envy barely contained, couldn't take her eyes off the scene. Look at that fool. How he lets himself be enraptured by this woman. What's so special about him? It's not that she's a dazzling beauty, he muttered to himself, as his sandwich lost all ability to appease his uneasiness. Ren and Nora's smile, wide and genuine, reflected the amusement they felt at Pira's barely concealed jealousy. I don't know, Nora said with a hint of complicity, I think they're lovely together. That's right, they're an admirable couple, Ren agreed, adding his perspective to the conversation. Pira, with a gesture of disgust, ended her snack. You know what? She should go. Her mother will surely be waiting to reprimand her if she is not by her side, helping with the housework. With a determined step, Pira headed towards where Naruto and Naira were. Hello, Naira, he greeted, trying hard to hide his embarrassment at his presence. Hello, Pira, how are you? Replied Naira, radiating happiness. Here it is again, that irritatingly innocent smile, thought Pira, unable to hide her annoyance. I think you should go. Your mother might be in need of your help and you don't want her to be mad at you, he suggested in a tone that was meant to be kind. I don't think that worries you in the least, Naira replied calmly. Pira, persistent, replied, I'm sure so. Plus, you have to have a lot of backlog of work. Naira, with a look that exuded understanding, nodded softly. You're right, I should be with her. Naruto, I'm saying goodbye for now. With a farewell gesture, Naira walked away, leaving behind a trail of melancholy that hung in the air. Pira, with a blank stare, contemplated the scene with a bittersweet feeling that oscillated between relief and remorse. Naruto, with a heavy sigh, said goodbye to Naira. Take care, we'll talk later. Loneliness hung over him. Naira was gone, and though he was surrounded by company, his desire was to be with her. The uncertainty of when they would meet again weighed on his spirits. Pyrrha, he called in a faint voice. Yes, she answered, coming closer. Come and sit here. Pyrrha took a seat and Naruto rested on her lap. She, her cheeks aflame with a deep blush, opted for silence and began to stroke her golden hair with the same sweetness that Naira had shown. A feeling of comfort came over her, and a smile spread across her face. How are you, Naruto? Pyrrha asked softly. I'm fine, now that you're here with me, he replied, with a smile that reflected gratitude. It's a comfort to have these quiet moments, Pyrrha confessed, her smile lighting up the clearing. Yes, it's fortunate that we finished early. In addition, Naira has provided us with food, and I am deeply grateful to her, Naruto said, his gaze lost in a dream. Pyrrha frowned, annoyed by the change of subject. Tell me, how did you get to this town? He asked, trying to divert the conversation. Well, I came here 3 years ago looking for a job, and that's when Naira found me. She was much taller than me back then. Naruto immersed himself in his memories, his voice becoming nostalgic. Again, thought Pyrrha, her irritation growing like a storm. Every conversation seemed to revolve around Naira. Enough is enough. Always Naira this, Naira that. You do nothing but talk about her. Pyrrha burst out, unable to contain her frustration. Naruto, surprised by the outburst, pulled away from her lap and stared at her. Hey, it's not true, are you jealous? She asked, a glint of amusement in her eyes. And no, she stammered, her voice betraying her denial. For Kami's sake, you're jealous. Is it because of Naira? Pyrrha, please tell me it's not serious, Naruto said, his smile widening at the revelation. Pyrrha, in a whirlwind of feelings, finally faced the truth. What does it matter if I am? She replied with a mixture of defiance and vulnerability that she could barely conceal. The feelings she harbored for Naruto had blossomed in secret, fueled by the passage of time, and now, in the face of the inescapable reality, she could only acknowledge the deep love she felt for him. Naruto, with a smile that radiated calm, invited her to open his heart. Come on, Pyrrha, tell me what you're worried about. She hesitated, her voice revealing the internal struggle. It's just that you keep talking about it and I feel like you're leaving us out. Admitting this was painful to him, as if he were using his friends to hide his real concern. Naruto, with a sympathetic look, tried to ease his uneasiness. Look, I haven't seen her for a long time, and yet here I am, with you and with the others. You have all my time. Yes, but that doesn't comfort me, Pyrrha acts like she's a wayward child. So, let's make a deal. Naruto proposed, a spark of complicity in his eyes. Ask me for something, anything, and it will be yours. She, with a mischievous smile, accepted the challenge. I want a date. Surprise was painted on Naruto's face, and a faint blush tinged his cheeks. Ah, okay, although I didn't expect it. Won't you grant my wish? Of course, just tell me when and where, and I'll be there. No, not like that, Pyrrha protested, crossing her arms impatiently. I want you to be the one to organize everything. I want to go to a lovely restaurant, come with flowers and dedicate a song to me. Naruto, faced with the demand, could only nod. You're picky, but it's okay. At that moment, Nora's voice echoed in the distance. Hey, lovebirds, it's time to go. Yes, Naruto replied with an affirmative shout and, without further ado, lifted Pyrrha in his arms, leading her to meet her companions in bridal style. She didn't protest. On the contrary, she let herself go, flooded with happiness. He smiled, enjoying the moment, wishing in the depths of his being that this instant would last forever. I never imagined that love could be reborn with such force, like a flame that is rekindled by the breath of a memory. It's madness, a whirlwind of emotions that defies logic and reason. Love, that mysterious traveler, arrives without announcement, without permission, and settles in the heart with the softness of a whisper. And that's how it came, unexpectedly, invading every corner of his being. There was no possible defense. She appeared, and her mere presence was enough to alter his world. There was Cinder Fall, the sight of her figure setting off a whirlwind of forgotten feelings. Cinder Fall, how are you? Asked Flint in a voice that echoed in the silence, as she watched him with a look that exuded boredom, though a subtle, enigmatic smile was drawn on her lips. Flint, how's it going? She replied, turning her attention to John, who was trying to hide her nervousness. John, how's the job? With an effort of bravery, he faced her gaze, those eyes that were like two jewels shining in the gloom. Cindy, how have you been? She stopped, as if time had frozen, and then, with a warm, surprising smile, answered. I asked first, he said playfully, as John shrugged. Everything is going well. I've just finished my shift with Flint, and now we plan to explore the town, John replied, her voice reflecting a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Oh, I understand, can I join you? Asked Cinder, her voice a melody floating in the air. Of course, there's no problem, Flint interjected gleefully, but was abruptly interrupted by John. Flint, I think you should go, he said firmly, his seriousness contrasting with the lightness of the moment. Why? Asked Flint, his confusion evident. You've got unfinished business, John insisted, his tone leaving little room for debate. No, I'm sure I have nothing, Flint replied, but his words vanished before John's determined gaze. I'm sure you do, John insisted, and at that moment Flint understood the unspoken message: he must leave them alone. However, he resisted, not because he didn't want to, but out of concern. I'm sorry, but we're bound together by these handcuffs, so I'll follow you wherever you go, Flint said, pointing to the chains that bound them. No problem, John replied, pulling out a key that Flint always carried with him. Flint's surprise was palpable. When had John taken the key? With a swift gesture, he freed Flint and, in a symbolic act, joined his own hand to Cinder's. The scene unfolded like a dance, every movement and word wove a story of love and desire, of encounters and farewells. The characters, each with their own melody, created a symphony of emotions that echoed in the air, a love song that only they could hear. // Lost in the labyrinth of nameless streets, Cinder and John wandered with uncertainty as their only company. The silence between them was an invisible wall, each deep in thought, unable to cross the gap between them. Despite the emotional distance, John knew that Cinder was the missing piece in the puzzle of his heart. John, normally brave, found in love an adversary that intimidated him more than any previous challenge. His voice was lost in his throat, and the words dissolved before he was born. It seems like some things never change, you still have your childish tastes, Cinder said, his smile a ray of sunshine in the dim light of their interaction. You mean the T-shirt? Asked John, pointing to the image of a rabbit on his chest. It's special to me, it evokes happy memories. But you've changed a lot since those childhood days, when you were so fragile and delicate. Cinder frowned, and in a flash of speed, she lunged forward, dragging John with the chain that bound them. Seeing him fall, she stopped and watched John on the ground. Her laugh, clear and genuine, filled the air. Ha ha ha, I see you're still as vengeful as ever. Lying on the cool pavement, John lifted his gaze to the sky, searching the mosaic of clouds for a sign to calm the whirlwind of his soul. Beside him, Cinder approached, her silhouette outlined against the sky, watching him from her height, like a goddess contemplating a mortal. John, enchanted by her aura, pondered the ephemeral nature of love, a feeling that had sprung in his chest with the force of an overflowing river. A memory made its way through his thoughts, a starry night of confessions and promises. His lips curved in a gesture of nostalgia. Cinder, that day She interrupted him with a gesture of her hand, her voice was a whip. I don't want to hear it, she said firmly. Sorry. There's no need for apologies. We were just children, exploring a world bigger than our dreams. Gently, Cinder knelt and cradled John's face in her hands, their eyes met and for a moment, time seemed to stop. But the magic broke with the arrival of a third voice. See Cinder, stammered Emerald, interrupting the moment. Cinder frowned, clearly annoyed, but chose not to show her irritation. It's time to go, right? Yes, Emerald replied. John felt an unexpected relief at the interruption. For a brief moment, he had considered the possibility of a kiss, a gesture that would seal their renewed connection. The gratitude for the interruption was palpable. Cinder detached herself from John and walked away with Emerald, her figure outlined against the village landscape, a shadow among the light. Emerald followed Cinder with a complicated look, a mix of concern and darkness. Something was not right, and in all the years she had known Cinder, she had never seen her so alive, so radiant. John had awakened something in her, and jealousy began to consume Emerald. Cinder, began Emerald, her voice trembling. That boy, John, you. Cinder cut her off with an icy look. That's none of your business, she said authoritatively. Focus and follow my orders. How are things going? Everything is in order, Emerald replied, her voice submissive, reflecting the hierarchy between them. The village, with its cobblestone streets and pastel-colored houses, was the stage for this story of love and jealousy. In the twilight of a day marked by chaos, cries of despair echoed in the air, a symphony of grief that only those with hardened hearts could ignore. She, accustomed to such sounds, remained motionless, her steely will unshakable in the face of the suffering of others. The heart-rending screams and the echo of fracturing bones were the backdrop to a macabre scene, but not enough to spur her into action. Suddenly, a figure collapsed at his feet. It was Ilya Amidola, his face contorted with pain, his arm at an unnatural angle. Tears welled up in her eyes like rivers of anguish before the darkness of fainting claimed her. From the gloom, a presence approached with an eerie calm. A man wrapped in a black robe, his face hidden behind a pristine white mask, approached her. His posture radiated confidence, and as he reached his side, he bowed in a respectful bow. Good afternoon, Miss Sienna Khan. I regret my audacity, he said in a voice that carried the weight of authority. Sienna, whose gaze was as piercing as ever, examined him closely. Who are you? He asked in a tone that brooked no evasion. Oh, excuse my lack of courtesy. My name is Sasuke, he replied, rising gracefully. She stood, her towering figure emanating power. I am Sienna Khan, leader of the White Fang, he declared firmly. I'm aware, miss, and I must say that the rumors don't do it justice. Your charm surpasses the stories I've heard about you, he remarked, trying to soften the mood with a compliment. Sienna kept her composure, unfazed by compliments. His voice was a sharp edge, a tool for uncovering hidden truths. What's your purpose here? He asked with a look that cut through the air like an arrow. I appreciate candor. I have come to request an audience with you, the visitor said, his tone respectful but firm. You break into my domain, you wreak havoc among my ranks, and you expect me to bestow such an honor upon you, replied Sienna, her voice a thunderclap in the stillness. My apologies for the intrusion. I tried a peaceful approach, but your men refused to listen. Patience has its limits, and mine were overcome, he explained, his posture being that of someone accustomed to confrontation. Sienna circled him, studying him with the meticulousness of a strategist. What are you looking for in these lands? He asked curiously. A hearing, as I have already mentioned, he insisted. No, tell me what you really want, Sienna pressed, her voice a whip that sought to wring out the truth. A safe passage, so to speak, he revealed, his gaze direct and defiant. So you're just seeking refuge here, you don't need anything else from me, then, Sienna deduced, her tone one of disdain. Yes, I could settle here on my own. However, I am not alone in this journey. There are others who accompany me, and I want you to guarantee their safety, as the White Fang dictates the law here, he explained, his voice carrying a tinge of urgency. Are they human? Sienna asked, her voice a whisper laden with venom. Unfortunately, yes, he admitted. Then you know my answer. A resounding no, Sienna said, her decision unwavering. Please listen. If you grant me what I ask for, I can offer you what you most desire. Tell me, what do you long for? He proposed, his gesture bold and calculating. I wish to see mankind prostrate, Sienna declared with a triumphant smile. So it will be, then, he agreed. Do you think it's that simple? We fawns have fought for years, and yet, nothing has changed, Sienna objected, her skepticism a suit of armor. It is true, but subduing does not always mean conquering or annihilating. Sometimes, it's enough to see them humiliated, defeated in spirit, he argued, his voice a whisper that promised revolution. Sasuke turned away from Sienna, turning his back on her as he raised his arms to the sky, as if trying to embrace the uncertain future he described. The world is at a turning point, Miss Khan. Soon, the known kingdoms will crumble, and their people, lost and desperate, will seek a light in the darkness. Menagerie will be that beacon, the last bastion of hope and unity in a fractured world, he said in a voice that echoed with the certainty of prophecies. Sienna, with a laugh of disbelief and her arms folded over her chest, challenged him. And how do you intend to accomplish such a feat? Do you have the power to overthrow entire kingdoms? I don't need such power. There are forces in motion that will take care of it. I have a feeling that Vale won't be the last to fall, he murmured, his voice low as the wind that portends a storm. But when that day comes, you will be ready, because I will be at your side to assist you. I don't require your help, she replied firmly, rejecting the offer with a wave of her hand. I think he does. Years of struggle and still, the White Fang has not seen the desired change. With me, things will be different. I do not seek to usurp his position or lead. I only ask for refuge for myself and those who accompany me. Aren't you tired, Miss Khan? He asked, his voice soft but full of meaning. I'm fine, though the paperwork can be overwhelming, she admitted, her voice revealing a hint of fatigue. Quote. Yes, of course it is. With a protective gesture, he put his arm around her and led her out of the camp. There, the sight of his fallen men, writhing on the ground, was a mute testimony to the recent conflict. Sasuke, with the patience of a master waiting for a revelation, questioned Sienna. Miss Khan, tell me, what do you observe at the moment? Sienna, whose voice was tinged with unexpected melancholy, responded. I behold my vanquished warriors, a mirror of the fragility of our cause. Beyond that, what else does she perceive in this vast landscape? Continued Sasuke, urging her to look beyond. She scanned the horizon, where menagerie stretched out before them, a land of stark contrasts. I only see a barren land, an arid land that offers little. Isn't she exhausted from this reality, tired of procuring weapons in the shadows to protect her people, isn't she? Asked Sasuke, her voice an echo of the truth she knew well. That's right, she admitted, her fury growing with each word. I can provide you with the weapons you need. Aren't you tired of seeing your people struggle day after day for a scarce livelihood, due to the barrenness of this land? he proposed, offering solutions to their hardships. Yes, she said, her anger palpable in the air. I have the capacity to provide you with food and resources. Don't you wish to free yourself from this isolation? From being incommunicado, distant from the kingdoms, marginalized from the world? Yes, she said, her voice hardening with each affirmation. I can bring the world to your doorstep. And isn't she weary of seeing her people bow down to the kingdoms, begging for recognition? Asked Sasuke, her offer a balm to her wounded pride. Yes, I'm exhausted, she exclaimed, her cry a storm of frustration. Then, if you will allow me to take refuge here, I will deliver the world to your feet, Sasuke promised, his offer as tempting as an oasis in the desert. In the warm glow of the dining room, Naira watched with a smile as Naruto tasted the dish he had prepared with such care. Triple A, Naruto murmured, his mouth full of flavors that reminded him of distant homes and simpler times. Do you like it? Asked Naira, her eyes shining with the anticipation of the response. It's delicious, did you make it yourself? Replied Naruto, his voice tinged with genuine appreciation. Yes, with all my love, especially for you. Try this, I hope it's to your liking, she said, offering him another bite. Naruto nodded, his heart warming with every gesture of attention. If it's made by you, I'm sure I'll love it. Food always tastes better in good company, he said with a smile. From across the table, Hiro watched the scene with a mixture of exasperation and amusement. If you say so, brat, he said, remembering his old friend Tai. Naruto had that same natural charm, that ease of connecting with people, albeit often without realizing it. Charles, the protective father, could not hide his discontent. He knew the day would come when his daughter would find love, but as a father, he felt it was his duty to protect her from any potential pain. My dear, could you please bring me the sauce from the kitchen? She asked, looking for an excuse to interrupt the moment. Sure, no problem, Naira replied, her voice full of joy as she made her way to the kitchen. Taking advantage of his daughter's absence, Carlos confronted Naruto, his hands firmly on the table. What are you trying to do, Naruto? He asked sternly. Naruto, confused, replied innocently. I'm not trying to do anything, why are you asking? You're obviously trying to win my daughter over, exclaimed Carlos, his voice rising with the fury of a worried father. What? Exclaimed Naruto, surprised and offended. How can you think that of me? I wouldn't do such a thing. Hiro chimed in, adding fuel to the fire. I wouldn't believe you, sir. Guys like Naruto tend to break hearts unintentionally. I wouldn't be surprised if she already has some female fans at Vale. Naruto frowned, annoyed. You're making things worse, Hiro. Please, friends, tell her that I have no intention of Naira. Nora smiled mischievously. I don't know, sometimes I've seen you pretty flirtatious with her. Ren laughed softly. You should listen to the stories we have of Naruto in Beacon. They're worthy of a youth series. Frustrated, Naruto stood up. You know what, I'm going to go with Naira. At least she treats me well. As he made his way to the kitchen, the sound of laughter from his friends filled the room, all except Carlos and Pyrrha, who watched the scene with mixed feelings. Oh, Naira. Yes, Naruto. Did you find the sauce? No, it doesn't look like it's even there. Don't worry, I'll help you look for her. Naruto and Naira were on a joint quest, a small act of complicity that extended beyond the simple task of finding the lost sauce. Tell me, Naira, when are you celebrating your birthday? Asked Naruto with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. The question seemed to surprise her, and with a shy smile, she replied, Why do you ask? I'd like to know. If he comes over, I might prepare something special for you before we leave, Naruto explained, his voice carrying a tone of sincerity that needed no embellishments. Oh, that's very sweet of you. My birthday is September 20th, Naira revealed, her voice rising with a note of joy. That's the day after tomorrow, Naruto muttered to himself, a plan beginning to form in his mind. In the privacy of his thoughts, Naruto was having a conversation with Kurama, his lifelong companion. Are you really going to do this, Naruto? Asked Kurama. Since when do you care so much about her? Naruto replied. I don't do it, but if something happens and guilt consumes you, I fear how you might react, warned Kurama, his voice a reminder of the consequences that could follow. I've done my best, Kurama. I deployed clones to monitor each suspect, installed hidden cameras, but they were all discovered. They know I'm looking for them. I'll use Naira as a decoy. It's a risk I'm willing to take, Naruto confessed, his voice full of doubt and determination. With a smile that hid the pain of the decisions he had made, Naruto turned to Naira. Naira, what do you think if tomorrow we go through the village together, just you and me? I would like to enjoy these last moments with you before leaving for the Kingdom of Vale, he proposed, his smile was a veil over the storm that was brewing inside him. She, oblivious to the storm stirring in Naruto's heart, smiled broadly and nodded happily, excited at the prospect of spending time alone with him. In the shadows of the intrigue, a tension-laden conversation was unfolding between Mayor Alexander Smith and a mysterious figure. "How's the search going?" asked the voice on the other end of the line, its tone imbued with authority and expectation. "Sir, we're only 2 girls short," replied the mayor, his voice firm but betrayed by a barely perceptible tremor. "And what about the hunters in training?" the voice asked, his interest evident. "They'll leave tomorrow. They finished their mission today. I don't think we need to worry, sir," the mayor said, trying to instill confidence in his report. "The reward will be great if you do well what I ask of you," the voice promised, its tone now tinged with the promise of an opulent reward. "Yes, sir," said the mayor, and the call was cut off, leaving Alexander Smith deep in thought. A month ago, the man had come to town with tempting promises, and he, facing the twilight of his life and the fear of death, accepted without hesitation. Alone, the mayor allowed himself a wicked laugh, a thunderous sound echoing in the stillness of his office. "It's about time. There are only 2 girls left and I'll be able to do it. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha." His laughter was a dark omen of nefarious plans. The unfortunate events of the past had not allowed his plans to materialize, but now, with the townspeople so susceptible to persuasion, he made the most of the opportunity presented to him. The sunrise in the RWBY team's dormitory was always an adventure, especially when Ruby was excited. The sound of his whistle was the most effective and often the least welcome alarm. "What the hell is wrong with you?" exclaimed Weiss, his voice a thread of irritation and surprise. "We've got a mission to do, girls," Ruby announced, her enthusiasm bubbling like a fountain of soda. "It's not time yet, is it?" "There's still time," yawned Yang, his voice tinged with annoyance and sleep. "Yes, but I can't help but get excited. We'll finally have our own mission," Ruby said, though her smile faded into a disappointed expression. "Naruto didn't come. I guess he won't be able to give me any advice." Blake calmly interjected, "Don't worry. Perhaps his mission was more complicated than he expected. You know, it was a grim extermination." Weiss nodded, offering words of comfort. "Yes, we don't have to worry. He always comes out of these situations well," she said, her smile an attempt to hide her own concern. Weiss's attention shifted to Sway, the team's dog, who was resting peacefully. She walked up to him and knelt down. "How did my little one, my beautiful one, wake up?" she murmured, cooing him affectionately. "I still can't stand it," Blake murmured from his bunk bed, his voice barely a whisper in the room. "Don't listen to him, Sway. She's bitter," Yang replied, continuing to pet the dog. Weiss's curiosity was captured by a huge box near Ruby's bed. "And what's that?" he asked, pointing to the mysterious package. "Oh, this," cried Ruby, with a joy that lit up her face. "It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Look, Yang." "What do you mean?" asked Weiss, looking at the 2 sisters in confusion. "Well, every now and then we get a present," Ruby explained, her voice a song of anticipation. "And don't you wonder how he got here? Just like that. Don't you think it's suspicious?" Weiss argued, his tone one of caution and suspicion. "Don't worry about that. Things always have a way of showing up," he said with a relaxed smile. Ruby, her hands trembling with excitement, carefully placed the box on her bed and opened it. A collective gasp of astonishment filled the room. Even Weiss couldn't hide his surprise at the contents. Highly refined powder. "It's dust. Just what I needed for this mission." "How lucky!" exclaimed Ruby. His eyes fell on an attached note and he read aloud. "For your future mission, please use it carefully and don't cause too much trouble. Sincerely, I love you very much." Ruby melted into a coo. "Ah, that's so sweet. Who sent it to you?" asked Blake, intrigued. "Our dad," Yang replied for his sister. "He thinks we don't realize it, but we know it's him," she said with a smile full of affection. The RWBY team meticulously prepared for the mission. When it was time to leave, they made their way to the rendezvous point where the bullheads would pick them up. As they walked, they observed other students embarking on or returning from their missions. That's when they stumbled upon the CFVY team. "Velvet!" cried Ruby excitedly, stopping the aforementioned woman, who stopped and smiled, happy to see her friends. "Hi, Ruby and girls, how have you been?" said Velvet. "Very well, what about you?" "You've been on a mission for a week," Ruby said. "Yes, there were quite a few," Velvet replied in a tired tone. "Don't worry, I'm just going to rest." With a mischievous smile, Yang whispered, "It looks like Cardin is somewhat disturbed." Velvet, the rabbit-eared fawn, replied bewilderedly, "I really don't know what you mean," trying to change the subject. "But he talked about you often, perhaps more than usual. You should go see him, he seems to be mired in melancholy," Yang continued, urging. Velvet's response was a nervous babble. "Now, I suppose I should go see him. Her face flushed with intense redness, showing her embarrassment. What are they talking about? Asked Ruby, her confusion palpable. Blake, with a gesture of comfort, placed his hand on Ruby's shoulder. Don't worry about it, Ruby. It's just trivialities. He tried to downplay the situation gently. Oh, I understand, Ruby agreed, though not entirely convinced. So how are we going to approach this mission? I have a feeling that it will be a challenge. Our experience is limited, Weiss said with some trepidation. There is no reason to be alarmed, the leader assured firmly. We will be accompanied by an experienced hunter. Unexpectedly, the doors of the waiting bullhead opened, and a silhouette emerged from within. The person who appeared was not who they anticipated. Greetings, ladies. Are you ready to embark on a mission? Asked the ever-effervescent Professor Bartholomew Oobleck enthusiastically. I didn't know you read Sasuke. I love reading a good book. Sasuke, with a book in his hands, looked up at Roman's voice, who had settled down beside him curiously. What is it about? It's a collection of stories from the Remnant. Sasuke explained. There's one in particular about a knight and a lady in a tower that I find fascinating. Roman frowned. I'm not familiar with that story, and frankly, I don't have time to spare to immerse myself in every tale in this world. Sasuke smiled. It's a captivating narrative, a lovely princess confined to a tower and rescued by an honorable knight. Roman laughed. That sounds like a crappy story. Maybe it is, Sasuke admitted, sharing the laugh, but there's something valuable about these stories. I am a firm believer in the existence of heroes who, against all odds, emerge victorious at the end of the day. Roman's taunt was immediate. That's absurd, Sasuke. Heroes are relics of the past, if they ever existed in our era. Sasuke looked at Roman with a mixture of surprise and understanding. It looks like you're convinced of that. Of course I am. Do you consider hunters heroes? With a sneer, Sasuke replied, no, they are mere workers, serving the highest bidder. Although they would not stoop to stealing or destroying villages, with the right incentive. There are no limits to what they could do. Roman nodded in satisfaction. Exactly. In this world there are no heroes, only individuals making decisions. Heroes are an echo of the past, Sasuke. They've vanished. Or maybe they never existed. They were just a naive hope in my heart. Sasuke kept his gaze fixed on Roman, not to mock, but to better understand the man in front of him, the thief known as Roman. With a wistful sigh, Roman stroked his cane. There was a time when I considered myself a hero too, boy. Really? Tell me more about that, Sasuke urged, eager to know the story behind Roman's words. Quote. My origins are humble. I was born in a tiny village in the shadow of the kingdom of Mistral. The son of a woman of the night and raised in poverty, my existence changed drastically the day a client, consumed by rage, took my mother's life. From that moment on, everything came crashing down. I burned what little I had and set off for the kingdom of Mistral. There, amidst sporadic jobs and studies, I managed to enter a prestigious academy for hunter training. It was a hard-fought battle, but I triumphed. I couldn't settle. I felt fortune smiling upon me, presenting me with an unparalleled opportunity to transcend my origins. My life had been hell, but I was determined to prevent others from suffering the same fate. So I left for Vale and joined Beacon. Beacon. That's right, Sasuke. It was eons ago. He looked away and sighed, overwhelmed by nostalgia for those golden times. I joined the Brock team, that's what we were called. We were under the command of an honorable man, he said with barely contained resentment. Years ago, the Kingdom of Vale announced expansion plans. The news of enlarging the kingdom was greeted with jubilation. When the construction was completed and the boom came, happiness flooded the people. But then, tragedy befell us. The Grimms, interrupted Sasuke. Yes, those monsters broke into the village and razed it to the ground. My team and I went to evacuate the inhabitants, as did other teams, but... Open double angle bracket wait. We must return. Our comrades are over there. Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket number, it's too late. If we don't seal the tunnels, the Grimms will reach Vale. We can't allow it. Damn it. Close double angle bracket. Roman grabbed his leader by the throat. Open double angle bracket, don't do this, I implore you. Don't utter the command. I don't want to hurt you. Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket, it's the only exit. Do you think I want this? Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket, there's still time. Please give me a few minutes. I'll go get them. Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket, you won't be able to. It's useless. Close double angle bracket. The leader punched Roman's stomach, knocking him out of breath, and knocked him out with a punch to the temple. Roman, slowly recovering, was exhausted from the incessant combat against the Grimms. Open double angle bracket, please. Close double angle bracket, he pleaded. Open double angle bracket, don't do it. Close double angle bracket. He saw the hesitation in his leader's eyes and for a moment hoped that he would come to his senses, but immediately, his leader straightened up and firmly declared, "Open double angle bracket activation, command 001 close double angle bracket." Boom. All the tunnels collapsed. Guilt and shame devoured his soul. Interestingly, where they were, it didn't even shake. At that moment, Roman wished he was crushed by a rock so he wouldn't hear the desperate screams echoing behind the stone walls. He felt helpless. Tears began to flow in Roman as he recalled that painful memory. He stood up, clenching his fists tightly. That day, when we should evacuate people. Roman gasped, his chest heaving to the rhythm of a heart consumed by anger. No more than 30 minutes passed. Just half an hour, he exclaimed with a broken voice, strength leaving his being. And then the Council of Vale decided all was lost. My leader, the one in charge of that fatal decision, condemned thousands to death, my friends, our team. He didn't fight, he didn't deign to battle. With a burning gaze, Roman faced Sasuke, his eyes reflecting the image of his former leader. I would have gone back for them. He shouted, fury vibrating in every word. I could have saved them, but you closed the tunnels. I couldn't do anything. Wiping away tears, Roman hardened his expression. That's why I tell you, Sasuke, heroes are a myth. A true hero wouldn't have allowed those lives to be lost in vain. They would have fought to the end, no matter how desperate the situation. I would have. All those years of training, of effort, were in vain. I didn't save anyone. His voice turned bitter, and with a look of disdain, he continued. That's why I chose the path of the thief. It is preferable to be this than to be a false savior who only protects the interests of the powerful. No, never. Turning around, Roman began to walk away with slow, heavy steps. Take my advice, Sasuke. Don't try to be a hero. It's a path to nowhere. Sasuke, with a voice tinged with melancholy, replied, I already know that, Mr. Roman. I understand that being a hero may seem futile. But still, I would like to try. His words were a whisper, almost lost in the wind. At that moment, Sasuke felt a flood of memories invade him. Now I have a place where they can be at peace, he said with disguised laughter. It seems that, after all, the essence of a hero is still alive in me. Naruto was deep in thought, torn between duty and desire to enjoy the moment. Despite Naira's company, his mind was elsewhere, hatching a plan that bordered on madness. After all, I ended up in the hands of the police. My options were limited, he shared with Naira, trying to hide his concern. He had invited Naira to explore the village early in the morning, but the joy and enthusiasm that should have marked her day was conspicuous by its absence. He was acting, faking every smile, every laugh, all out of the need to identify the suspects hiding in the crowd. When is your birthday? Asked Naruto. Naruto, you've already asked me 7 times, do you forget it so quickly? Replied Naira with a laugh. It's the emotion of the moment. I'm sorry, Naruto apologized, though his attention was fixed on a man sitting in a nearby cafe. Sensing Naruto's gaze, the man tensed up and returned his gaze directly to Naira. I have found another. It's 20, Naruto murmured to the 9-tailed fox that resided inside. Why don't you confront the mayor directly and threaten him? Suggested Kurama in an impatient tone. Because he's just a suspect. I can't go around threatening anyone who seems suspicious to me. Also, I've been keeping an eye on him with my clones for days and he hasn't done anything remotely suspicious, Naruto explained, his voice reflecting a mixture of frustration and determination. You've become too soft, Kurama accused, his voice echoing in Naruto's mind. Naruto's relaxed posture and carefree smile could fool anyone, making them believe that he fully enjoyed casual conversation with Naira. However, in the depths of his being, his mind was in a state of analytical, paranoid hyperactivity. He was on the verge of taking an action he never had imagined possible, an act so radical that it had the potential to alter his destiny forever. It's interesting that you're a partner of Pira Nico's. I must admit that I feel a hint of envy, Naira confessed with a playful look. Envy? She's pretty ordinary, not as spectacular as she is portrayed in interviews, Naruto replied, minimizing the situation with a nonchalant gesture. I disagree with you. She is exceptional, as well as possessing breathtaking beauty, Naira replied, her admiration for Pira evident in her tone of voice. You're right about that, Naruto admitted, his smile was genuine this time. The conversation became more personal, and Naira inquired curiously. And how are things going between you and her? Okay, they're going well, Naruto said simply. I mean, if you've tried anything else. Romantic with her. Naruto raised an eyebrow and waved his hand indifferently. No, of course not. She would never give me a chance. Really? Why haven't you tried? I could try, but I don't think I have much chance. Look at me, Naruto said, pointing to himself with a self-deprecating smile, I'm nothing to write home about. Naira let out a soft laugh and, taking graceful steps forward, turned on herself and fixed her gaze on Naruto's I don't agree. I think you have a better chance than you imagine. Really? And how would you know? Intuition, she replied with a mysterious smile. // Alexander was in the dim light of the room when the door opened with a whisper and the imposing figure of Argo was outlined against the light of the corridor. With a deep bow, Alexander bowed to him, his voice barely a respectful murmur. Mr. Argo, how are you? I did not expect to have the honor of your presence. Argo, with a gaze that pierced the shadows, answered in a voice that was as much a whisper as a thunder. I know, Alexander, and I wasn't planning to visit you either. But tell me, why do those hunters still roam these parts? Complicity and concern were intertwined in Alexander's gaze. Lord, I have done all in my power, but I cannot drive them out. They just wander around, exploring the terrain, like mere tourists. Don't you understand the danger this represents? Argo inquired, his tone as sharp as steel. Alexander, with a forced calm, replied, they are not a threat. Once the ritual is complete, the raptures will cease, fading into oblivion. The tears of the families will dry up, and time will heal their wounds. Argo sat down at the mayor's desk, his fingers brushing the pen with an almost sacred delicacy. Remember, Alexander, when I presented this vision to you, when I seduced others with promises of greatness, assured them of power, don't you feel all-powerful now? Yes, Alexander admitted, his aura vibrating with newfound power, a feeling he had never experienced before. Argo continued, and as for eternal life, that ritual is the only means of granting you the promised immortality. You will witness the flow of time, unalterable, eternal. So I implore you, do not fail. Of course, my lord, said Alexander, his gaze rising to Argo. Despite his youthful appearance, no more than 30 years old, Alexander knew that Argo was a being more than 3 centuries old. Her hair was as black as night and her eyes, blue as the deep ocean, shone with a light that was not of this world. Her face, free of any marks or scars, was the epitome of beauty lost to time. He wore a simple white shirt, but on his chest shone the emblem of a golden sword and shield, symbols of an order of chivalry from an ancient and forgotten kingdom. The construction of the base had consumed 2 whole weeks, a negligible amount of time for someone with his capabilities. With a mere thought, he could erect such a structure over and over again, the task was trivial to his power. Expansion, however, became imperative, for though its strength seemed inexhaustible, its vital essence gradually faded. The voracity of his being demanded an ever-increasing tribute. What began with the absorption of 2 souls, soon multiplied to 5, then to 10, and so on, in an alarming progression. To complete the ritual that would promise him immortality, to keep his spirit from wearing out to extinction, he needed more lives, more souls. And to do so, it required a larger space, an operation of unprecedented magnitude. The air was filled with an almost imperceptible whisper, the sound of souls crying out in silence, as he gazed at the horizon of his domain. The base, a marvel of architecture and magic, stood as a monument to his boundless ambition. The walls, imbued with arcane energies, vibrated with the echo of consumed destinies. Each stone was a testament to his power, each shadow a reminder of his dark pact. Lately, Naruto had noticed something unsettling, Kiro's gaze. It wasn't so much the way he watched her, but his scrutiny towards Pyrrha. Each interaction, each response from her, was followed by a nod of his head, as if validating every word and action, as if unraveling the threads of her being. This was not only suspicious to Naruto, but he also saw a shadow of Ozpin in it, as if both were orchestrating a plan with their friends as pawns in a game of uncertain consequences. Nora, on the other hand, couldn't contain her amusement. The seriousness with which Naruto analyzed Kiro was unexpected. He watched as Kiro moved closer and closer to the redhead, and with a knowing elbow, drew Ren's attention to the situation. Ren, with a sly smile, joined the observation game. Naruto, Nora hummed, trying to get his attention. Nora, Naruto replied, without taking his eyes off the object of his study. Why do you study Kiro so much? Nora asked, with a mischievous glint in her eyes. I don't study it, I keep an eye on it, Naruto stated firmly. But why? Insisted Nora, seeking to delve deeper into her reasons. Because of things, was Naruto's elusive reply, keeping his suspicions a secret. Ren stood next to Naruto, patting him on the back in a sign of camaraderie. It seems that Pyrrha is really captivated by Mr. Kiro. No surprise, after all, he is a man of the world, with enviable status and an exceptional hunter. It's natural for me to feel admiration for him, he said in a tone that mixed mockery with observation. Naruto's laughter resounded with a tone of mockery. Come on, don't take me for naive. I appreciate his renown and prowess as a hunter, but Kiro is not someone who can be trusted, that's for sure, he said with a confidence that belied his contempt for Kiro's ulterior motives. Ren raised his hands in a soothing gesture. Wow, you've gotten defensive too quickly, he said. Naruto replied vehemently, it's not defensive, it's caution. And that's irrelevant now. Don't you see the obvious? It's strange that I'm always by her side. Nora laughed lightly. I think it's lovely that a teacher cares so much about his students. He's not our mentor, and what worries me is that he's not here with us, but always with her, Naruto replied with a suspicious tone. Nora chimed in with a sly smile. Let it be. I'd rather he keep an eye on Pyrrha alone and leave me alone. I don't want him to evaluate my behavior. Naruto frowned. That's absurd. He should be here, supervising all of us, not showing favoritism for a single student. Ren looked at Naruto with a wry smile, sensing the embarrassment in his friend. You seem restless, mate, he said in a tone that bordered on mockery. Naruto, confused and slightly irritated, replied, What do you mean? With a playful smile, Ren teased Naruto even more. I get the impression that you might be experiencing a hint of jealousy, perhaps. Naruto's reaction was instantaneous. A sigh of surprise escaped her lips and an unexpected blush colored her cheeks. How ridiculous. I've never been jealous of anyone. Except, perhaps, Sasuke, but that's another story. What nonsense. I'd never be jealous, much less someone like that. Don't you realize he's an alcoholic? Exclaimed Naruto, his voice rising in an attempt to deny his friend's provocations. Your voice rises, which makes me think you're a little upset. You should try to calm down, Ren said, his smile now wider and more evident. I'm perfectly calm, protested Naruto, though his voice rose even higher. Come on, Naruto, there's no shame in admitting it. We all experience jealousy at some point, Ren insisted, clearly enjoying his friend's awkwardness. Guys, I'm really starting to get annoyed. Naruto was about to continue, still with his frustration growing, when he was abruptly interrupted by the sound of an incoming call on his scroll. Yes, he asked, and instantly, Naira's trembling voice filled the air, her fear palpable even through the distance. Quickly pressing the speaker, Naira's voice, broken by sobs, resounded desperately, Naruto, someone is trying to force entry into my room, they are banging on the door hard, they are coming for me. Worry was painted on everyone's faces, Naira was in imminent danger. Listen, Naira, stay calm, I'm coming to you, Naruto said, his voice a beacon of hope in Naira's storm of panic. As he ran, keeping the call, he knew that no matter his speed, he wouldn't make it in time. Listen to me, when they find you, shout every detail you can catch of them. Tattoos, eye color, beard, features, everything, he instructed urgently. Then, the sound of the door giving way mingled with Naira's terrified scream at being discovered. A tattoo on my left hand, a spider, she exclaimed. He's missing a finger, he continued, his voice trembling. He has a gray beard and blue eyes, she cried, describing her captor. Please, Naruto, help me, find me, he pleaded desperately. I'm coming, Naira, he cried, desperation tinging every word. An ominous laugh echoed on the other end of the line. Good luck finding her. Naruto paused, his gaze fixed on the scroll, his brow furrowed in concentration. He took a deep breath, his fists clenched tightly, then relaxed. He was trying to calm his nerves, but anger boiled inside him, uncontrollable. The air was charged with the tension of the situation, every second was crucial, and at that moment, Naruto's resolve became stronger than ever. He was ready to face whatever came his way, to save his friend, to defy the fate that hung over them with menacing darkness. Professor Oobleck will be our guide, Weiss asked, incredulously. The news took her by surprise. The professor seemed more prepared for a jungle expedition than a combat mission. It's Dr. Oobleck, he corrected with a smile. Excuse me, could you tell us about the specifics of our mission? Sure, it's basic reconnaissance and terrain exploration, nothing out of the ordinary. The tension was palpable between them from the moment they boarded the ship on their way to their destination. The confidence they used to have was gone. They didn't want to appear prejudiced, but Professor Oobleck's reputation wasn't exactly based on warlike prowess. Rather, they considered him a scholar of history, not a hunter in the traditional sense. Dr. Oobleck, sensing their doubts, confronted them directly. You think I'm unfit to be a hunter, that my presence poses a risk to the mission, right? The girls shook their heads vehemently, though they knew he was right in his guess. How had he been able to read his thoughts so clearly? Don't worry, young people. I understand your concerns, but I assure you that I would not be teaching at Beacon Academy if I were not able to take care of myself and you. Besides, we're almost there, he added in a tone that was meant to be comforting. Despite his words, the girls couldn't help but feel disappointed. The mission they had envisioned was far from the reality they now faced, a reality filled with uncertainty and, possibly, unanticipated dangers. //. The room was in total chaos, the damage was evident everywhere, and it was clear that these vandals had been thoroughly employed. Pyrrha, with a gesture of compassion, placed her hand on Naruto's shoulder, trying to offer him some comfort. I'm so sorry about this, Naruto, However, Naruto seemed oblivious to his empathy. His attention was fixed on a flower pot that, for some reason, had survived the mess. He walked over and pulled out a small artifact, a hidden camera. Meticulously, he inspected the device and attached it to his scroll. He dived into the device's internal memory and selected a specific recording. Let's see what we have here, Naruto muttered. The content of the video was revealing. It clearly showed the meticulous kidnapping that had been orchestrated. Wait a minute, Nora interrupted, pointing to a man in the recording who was struggling with Naira. Isn't that the mayor's secretary? Pyrrha, watching closely, recognized another figure. Wait, that man is the middleman in charge of transporting the powder to this area, Mr. Garrison, he remarked with surprise. Ren, for his part, took aim at a woman in the video. And she's the owner of the village boutique, he said. We seem to have civilians involved in this matter, Hiro concluded in a thoughtful murmur. This confirms some of our suspects, Naruto said, turning off the screen and meticulously searching the room for any clues. Hiro watched him with a piercing gaze. Tell me, why was there a camera in Naira's room? Have you been watching her all this time? No, of course not, Naruto replied calmly, only since this morning. Hiro frowned, confused. Wait, why today? What made you install it just now? Naruto held up a business card he had found in the rubble, belonging to the clothing store. Naruto, how did you know? Asked Hiro, his voice tinged with a mixture of fear and suspicion. Naruto slowly turned to face Hiro, his eyes empty and serene. They held each other's gaze in silence for a few tense seconds until, suddenly, Hiro widened his eyes in an expression of horrific realization. It can't be, Hiro exclaimed incredulously. Naruto chose to remain silent, avoiding confirming or denying the accusation. It was you planned this kidnapping, accused Hiro, his voice full of anger and betrayal. Everyone in the room turned to Naruto, shocked by the severity of the accusation. Naruto, however, remained silent, his expression unflappable. Yes, I was the one who organized all this, he finally confessed, with a calmness that contrasted with the tension of the moment. Hiro, blinded by anger, lunged at Naruto and pushed him against the wall, his voice a low growl. Give me just one reason not to disfigure yourself with blows, you wretch. Naruto, unfazed by Hiro's fury, responded with an icy calm. I understand your anger, and I know that there is no justification for what I did. I will assume the consequences of my actions, that is out of the question. But listen. All the kidnapped victims were between 18 and 20 years old, none older. They all shared the same date of birth, but there were no other connections between them, neither in physical appearance nor in biometric data. Nothing. As fate would have it, Naira's birthday was September 20th, so I decided to use that date as a decoy. I had suspicions about the involvement of certain civilians, but I lacked concrete evidence, so I orchestrated this kidnapping. I was sure they wouldn't dare approach her with me close, vigilant and protective. Naruto narrated in detail. I set up a camera here and we went out looking for more clues, that's when they jumped at the chance. He confessed bluntly. Why didn't you tell us, Naruto? Whispered Pyrrha, and the rest of the team shared her look of bewilderment and reproach. I was aware that they would oppose it, and I don't blame them. My actions go against everything they stand for. Naruto explained, his voice steady. Do you realize what you've done, boy? You've put a human life on the line, Hiro snapped sternly. I am fully aware of the seriousness of the situation. Naira is my friend and I care about her as much as you do, but it was a necessary step. She, just like anyone else, deserves a chance at life. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect them, even if it means getting my hands dirty and carrying the weight of guilt for the rest of my days. As long as I have the ability to act, I won't stop, Naruto proclaimed, his conviction echoing in every word. Hiro, about to let his anger vent into a fist against Naruto, held back and exhaled deeply, trying to quell the internal storm that consumed him. Abstinence from alcohol only exacerbated his discomfort. Listen carefully, Naruto began, his now more pragmatic tone. You can judge and condemn me later, but now we have lives to save. Fortunately, this video has given us a suspect. It's time to pay a visit to the mayor's secretary. The mayor's secretary, Mr. Connor, walked into his office with a satisfied smile, oblivious to the gravity of his recent actions. He didn't expect to find Naruto, a golden-haired young man, sitting quietly at his desk, flipping through some documents. Interesting job you have here, Mr. Connor, Naruto remarked without looking up from the papers. Connor frowned, surprised and annoyed by the intrusion. What are you doing here, boy? He asked in a stern tone. Naruto looked up, his expression a mixture of apology and determination. I'm sorry for the lack of formality, but I needed to get your attention somehow. You see, an hour ago a friend of mine was kidnapped. Connor tried to show sympathy, even though it sounded hollow. What sad news. It was Naira, Carlos' daughter, Naruto added, carefully observing Connor's reaction. The secretary put his hand to his face, feigning consternation. Oh, Charles's poor daughter. What a tragedy. He went to a safe, inserted a combination, and pulled out a bottle of alcohol. He poured himself a glass and drank it in one gulp, trying to appear normal. How can I help you? He asked, trying to hide his nervousness. You could start by telling me where she is. That would be a big help, Naruto suggested calmly. Connor blinked, bewildered by the outright accusation. Excuse me, he replied, offended. You heard that right. Tell me where you were and we can call this matter over, Naruto insisted, remaining calm. Don't start with that nonsense. I have no idea what you're talking about, exclaimed Connor, losing his composure. Naruto sighed, his patience wearing thin. There are other ways to get the information I need. Connor began to feel unwell, his body unresponsive. Everything around him was spinning and his consciousness was fading. Before falling to the ground, he managed to hear Naruto's last words. I shouldn't drink so much alcohol. After all, it's bad for your health. And with that, Connor collapsed, unconscious, on the floor of his own office. Yang stared listlessly at the desolate landscape of Mountain Glen. This place is really depressing, he remarked with a sigh, so this is where we need to do our reconnaissance and research. RWBY, always focused on the mission, reminded her sister of the task at hand. Don't be distracted, Yang. We have to set up a camp, he said with determination. Yes, exclaimed Yang, his voice echoing with forced enthusiasm. Blake, with a shyness he didn't usually display, chimed in with a question he seemed to have been suppressing. And aren't you going to talk about it? He asked, pointing subtly to Dr. Oobleck, who was absorbed in observing the surroundings. His usual energy seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a melancholy that made him sigh regretfully. The only spark of life he showed was when he saw the dog that accompanied them. RWBY, noticing the change in her teacher, approached cautiously. Teacher. Oobleck, she called, but he gave her only a fleeting glance, his attention still fixed on the moon. Yes, Miss Rose, he finally answered, without correcting her for not using her correct title. We've already set up camp, RWBY said, waiting for some reaction. All right, Miss Rose. Could you call your sister? Asked Oobleck, his tone unusually serious. Yes, of course, but why? Asked RWBY, confused. I need to talk to her, was all he said, keeping it a mystery. Once at the camp, the group got to work. They investigated the anomalies of the Grims in the southeast, under the watchful eye of Dr. Oobleck, who silently assessed them. The girls were striving to impress their teacher with their performance. Dr. Oobleck, RWBY called, finally using his correct title. You use my title at last, he replied, turning to a RWBY who was looking at him curiously. Do you need anything? He asked, as he walked through the rubble of the fallen city. It's just that, RWBY began, but Oobleck interrupted her. Do you wonder why I've been interrogating your companions all day? He supposed. No, actually, what I wanted to know is, why did you decide to become a hunter? Asked RWBY, following him through the ruins. Oobleck stopped and looked at her, surprised by the question. Tell me, Miss Rose, what do you see around us? He asked, inviting her to look beyond the obvious. RWBY surveyed the desolate panorama that stretched out before her, the remnants of what was once a vibrant city. All I see is ruin and abandonment, he said in a trembling voice, his heart heavy with the sight. Dr. Oobleck turned to her, his countenance serious and thoughtful. What I see are lives we could have saved. He began to walk, his footsteps echoing in the silence, and RWBY followed, hanging on to every word. As a hunter, my duty is to protect those who can't defend themselves, and while guns are useful tools, I believe that as an educator I have the opportunity to exert an even deeper influence, he explained, offering him a comforting smile. Knowledge is the most powerful weapon there is. I can impart it to the young people who walk into my classroom, inspiring them to change the world. I don't just see the lives lost, I see the possibility of a better future, the chance to learn from our mistakes so that history doesn't repeat itself. He stopped and turned to RWBY, who was looking at him with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. I chose to be a hunter because there is no other vocation in this world that awakens in me such passion and purpose. And if I can ignite that same passion in at least one of my students, then I will have succeeded. RWBY reflected on Oobleck's words, feeling the seed of determination begin to germinate within her. In the midst of the desolation, he had found a spark of hope and a renewed sense of purpose. Night had fallen on the camp, and the party was gathering around the campfire. Even though their minds were focused on the task, the general mood was low. Professor Oobleck had spent the day questioning her motivations for becoming a hunter, all of them except RWBY. Perhaps in his heart, RWBY's actions were what he considered closest to what a true huntress should be. Come on, girls, let's cheer up, RWBY said with an encouraging smile. Yes, you're right, Yang replied, regaining his usual spirit in an instant. We must strive to improve. That sounded a little redundant, Weiss said with a neutral expression. Professor Oobleck, who had been watching from a distance, walked over to the campfire and sat down with them. He stretched out his hands to the flames to warm himself. Could any of you tell me a story? He asked as he took a sip from his thermos. Ah, although this coffee is good, it doesn't compare to Mr. Uzumaki's. Should I ask him for another package? Ruby smiled at her friend's name. Speaking of Naruto, how do you think he's doing on his mission? It must be going well, they all replied in unison, showing absolute confidence in their partner. Professor Oobleck raised an eyebrow at such assurance, but he could not blame them. Naruto Uzumaki was known for his reliability and efficiency. Yang's smile turned playful. Do you think Pyrrha will finally dare to tell you how she feels? No, I don't think so, Blake said skeptically. He'll probably back down like he's done before. Weiss frowned and crossed his arms. Even if she dared, Naruto wouldn't accept. He's not interested in being in a relationship right now, he confessed to me. Sure, Yang said, waving his hand disdainfully. Naruto can say that, but opinions can change quickly. Pyrrha just needs to be a little more insistent, he gestured with his hands to emphasize his point. Stop doing that, it's disgusting, Weiss replied with disgust. He would not fall so easily. Naruto is very different from others, a man. He's 15 years old, Blake interjected. I don't think he can be considered a man yet. Conversation flowed around the campfire, with the flames dancing and casting shadows that seemed to dance to the rhythm of his words. Weiss defended Naruto's maturity, and they all shared their thoughts and theories about him and Pyrrha, immersed in the warm glow of the night. Professor Oobleck watched the scene with a smile, recalling simpler and happier times. Naruto Uzumaki, he began, grabbing everyone's attention. It's true, he's not an ordinary boy. He graduated from Empire Academy at age 13, toured Remnant on a journey of self-discovery and learning, and at 15, entered Beacon Academy, the most prestigious of hunters. At first, we found his credentials incredible, almost impossible to believe. But after thorough verification, we confirm its authenticity. It was evident that someone of his caliber could not go unnoticed. We accepted it immediately, and to our surprise, it exceeded all expectations. It was, without a doubt, the best of the best. With a serious look, Oobleck continued. I'll be frank with you girls. Naruto surpasses them in every aspect, both physically and mentally, intellectually, and in analytical ability. There is no possible comparison. And something that all of us teachers have noticed is their appreciation for friendships, even if they are few. He values them deeply. To all of you. The girls smiled, moved by his words. He would do whatever it took to keep them safe, no matter how difficult or challenging the situation might be, no matter how bad and cruel he had to be, Oobleck concluded with a firm voice, and everyone listened, knowing that Oobleck spoke the truth. / Pam. Collision. The sound of a slap was heard. Wake up. The man was confused, a little disoriented. I need you to pay attention to me. Naruto then showed him 2 steel rods and embedded them directly into the man's thighs. Ah, she screamed in agony. The pain was unbearable. Have you listened to me yet? Naruto asked. He nodded his head quickly, holding back the screams. Naruto connected 2 tweezers on each of the rods. It was practically an electrical connection now. Naruto, enough is enough, Pyrrha shouted, but the aforementioned ignored her and continued. He stared at Connor. Where's Naira? Naruto asked. The aforementioned Connor looked at him defiantly and Naruto got quite angry. Where's Naira? He shouted again. Then he spat in her face. Naruto barely reacted, he took a handkerchief from his jacket and wiped his saliva. Once that was done, he saw that Connor was still defiant, so he crumpled up the handkerchief and embedded it in Connor's mouth. She walked away from him, and Connor followed him with his eyes. Naruto walked over to a switch and turned it on. He groans in pain. Connor. The electric current passed through Connor's body and he gritted his teeth and groaned in pain. The veins were noticeable in his neck. A few seconds passed and Naruto decided to cut off the electrical signal. He was calm and unflappable. You know, the Atlesian army did this kind of thing, but they found that the villages they did it in had very bad networks and dust was inaccessible at the time. They were very small. Sometimes, when they wanted to do it, there was no power for hours, and that made them sick. They started resorting to things like pulling out their nails, putting acid on their skin, etc. Naruto again started walking in Connor's direction and positioned himself in front of him. His friends and Kira were watching this scene. When Naruto said something about the interrogation, they didn't expect anything like this. The exercise used to be very tiring, but now the energy is stable. There's a constant flow. You flip a switch and the power comes in all day. Naruto said cruelly. The blonde walked up to Connor, took the handkerchief out of his mouth, and asked again in a serious voice, where is he? Connor's will still hadn't been broken, and he spat at her again. Naruto became exasperated again, picked up the handkerchief and placed it in his mouth. Connor tried desperately not to let that thing get back in, but he was unsuccessful. He watched sideways as Naruto moved away from him and closer to the switch. He groaned in anger, for he knew what awaited him, and tried to plead, but could not speak. Then Naruto again turned on the current and the electricity passed through his body, causing him to moan in pain. Okay, kid, enough is enough, said Kiro, who slowly approached Naruto, but he gave her a look and pointed his finger at her. Stand still, Kiro, or I won't answer for the consequences, he warned, before turning his attention back to Connor and turning off the power. He walked over to Connor, his voice impatient. Time is of the essence, Connor. Give me what I'm looking for, or I'll let the electricity flow until it's cut off for non-payment. Tearing the handkerchief from Connor's mouth, Naruto demanded, Where's Naira? Connor's response was hesitant, full of uncertainty. I don't know. I really don't know. We were just tasked with bringing it here. All I know is that they want her for a sacrifice. Naruto's anger erupted. A sacrifice? Are you saying they kidnapped Naira for a sacrifice? Her scream echoed through the room as Connor nodded, exhausted. Who's behind this? Naruto pressed, but Connor's response was the same. I don't know. Naruto, frustrated, covered Connor's mouth again, who struggled weakly, muttering something unintelligible. RG. Or, also Connor on the balbus. Repeat that, Naruto demanded, picking up only snippets of Connor's words. Argo. Go, Connor repeated, his voice tired and pained. Argo, what is that? Is Argo a thing or a person? Naruto asked. A person, Connor confirmed, almost out of breath. Who else is involved? Naruto continued his interrogation. The mayor, was the reply. I see, Naruto muttered. Where can I find this Argo? I don't know. I really don't know, Connor insisted. Naruto got up and walked towards the switch. Connor, terrified, pleaded desperately. No, please. No, I swear I don't know. Naruto paused, his hand close to the switch, listening to Connor's pleas. Please, I don't know. Connor's desperation was palpable. Naruto, with an icy look, replied, I think you're telling the truth, but that won't save you. Just as she was about to turn on the current, Nora intervened, her face reflecting fear and worry. Please, Naruto, he pleaded. Don't do this. With a reassuring smile, Naruto withdrew his hand from the switch and raised his hands in peace. Okay, Nora. I won't do anything. Don't worry. Turning his attention to Connor, Naruto watched him silently, staring at the man crying before him. Connor, right? The man nodded. Listen well. You will stay here and wait. Don't try to escape, because I will find you. And if I do, he said, pointing to his friends, they won't be able to save you. No matter how much they plead for you, I will kill you. Understood. Connor nodded frantically, understanding the gravity of the warning. Let's go, Naruto ordered, and everyone followed him silently, not daring to approach. Pira, taking a deep breath, stood beside her leader. Naruto, about what happened? Don't worry, I did it, you have nothing to do with it. In fact, none of you saw anything, got it? Naruto cut off any attempt at discussion. Pira nodded slowly. Now what? Now, let's go visit the mayor, Naruto declared determinedly. In a gloomy corner of a room, a man hung pathetically by his feet, sobbing and pleading despite being fully aware of his actions. Alexander, with the impudence of one who knows himself guilty, cried out in despair. Get away from me, Uzumaki, I have friends, you know. He exclaimed in a broken voice. Naruto, unfazed by the pleas, approached with an eerie calm. Let's talk about your friends, especially Argo, he proposed with a sinister smile. I have no idea what you're talking about, replied Alexander, his voice full of panic. I think you do, Naruto insisted, his tone soft but menacing. I can't tell you anything, he'll kill me if I do, cried Alexander, fear palpable in every word. Naruto came even closer, his presence was like a shadow enveloping Alexander. If you don't cooperate now, I assure you you won't see another dawn, Naruto threatened, grabbing Alexander's head and looking him straight in the eye. Then, with a fluid movement, Naruto positioned himself behind him, beginning to assemble an unknown apparatus. First, your behavior is suspiciously bizarre compared to recent kidnappings. Second, your collaboration with the police has been practically non-existent. And third, Naruto continued, his voice hardened, your own secretary confessed your involvement. Alexander turned his head to look at Naruto, who had just turned on the device. What's that blowtorch? Asked Alexander, his voice trembling. Naruto adjusted the device until the temperature peaked. 200 degrees, Alejandro. At this temperature, even steel melts like butter, Naruto explained with a tone of scientific curiosity. Naruto circled Alexander, standing behind him and continued speaking. At first you won't feel pain. The heat is so intense that it will dry out your nerve endings before you can feel it. You'll go into shock and then you will feel unbearably cold. Naruto described, his voice was almost a whisper. Hiro and the others watched with expressions of confusion and horror, wondering what the hell Naruto was doing. They knew the heat didn't work that way. Science can be very entertaining. Naruto said with a crooked smile. I don't know anything, I swear, cried Alexander, despair seizing him. First you will smell the burnt flesh, and then the pain will come. Naruto continued, his tone was serene, almost reflective. But it wasn't Alexander's skin that smelled burning. Naruto had brought the flame close to a piece of meat on a nearby table, exposing it to the fire and making a cooking sound. Connor began to become alarmed, and then Naruto touched Alexander's back with a popsicle. Ha! Shouted Alexander, startled by the unexpected sensation. No, damn you, he exclaimed angrily. Naruto repeated the process, bringing the flame close to the flesh and touching Alexander's back with the cold popsicle. You smell it, don't you? I'm burning your fat, Naruto said, playing with Alexander's mind. Nora had to restrain herself from bursting out laughing. At first, she had been worried, thinking that Naruto would actually use the flame against Alexander, but now she was shocked at the psychological punishment he was inflicting on her. Pyrrha put a hand to her forehead, smiling at the scene. Ren tried to keep his composure, but a treacherous smile crept onto his lips. Hiro, on the other hand, clapped his hands with a suppressed laugh. Naruto continued his performance, bringing the flame closer to the flesh and touching Alexander's back with the popsicle. The scent is unmistakable. I'm burning your fat, Naruto repeated, as Alexander screamed, convinced to feel the scorching heat on his skin. The smell of scorched flesh filled the air, an unmistakable sign of the torture Alexander believed he was suffering. Naruto, with a wicked smile, touched Alexander's skin again with the popsicle, eliciting another heart-wrenching scream. Ha! Okay, I'll tell you everything you want to know, exclaimed Alexander, finally giving in to Naruto's psychological deception. That's what I wanted to hear, Naruto said in a voice that exuded satisfaction. Alexander, his breath ragged and his face pale with fear, began to recount his encounter with the mysterious Argo. A month ago, that man, Argo, he came up with a proposal I couldn't refuse, Alexander confessed, his voice barely a whisper. Naruto interrupted him impatiently. And what made you think it was a good idea to take a deal with him? I hope it was for more than just a few coins. It's not that simple, boy. I'm on my last legs, I don't have much time left, and cancer is killing me. How could I not cling to any hope? Explained Alexander, his gaze lost in painful memories. Argo promised me something that no one else could, immortality. Naruto frowned, incredulous. And you swallowed that story. Immortality, really? How could I not? Man has lived for more than 3 centuries. Believe it or not, he showed me proof, Alexander insisted, searching Naruto's eyes for a glimmer of faith. Yes, of course. And I guess he also flies and walks on water, Naruto replied sarcastically, though inside, a part of him couldn't help but be curious. Go on, what else did this god tell you? No kidding, Naruto. He is the reincarnation of a deity, or so he says. To grant me eternal life, he needs to perform an ancient ritual, one involving 25 young people. I don't understand all the details, but it seems that he requires his souls to convert them into pure energy, which is then transferred to himself, Alexander explained, his voice trembling as he revealed the dark secret. Naruto was silent for a moment, processing the information. Where can I find this Argo? I warn you, Naruto, this is not someone you can face so easily. I've seen experienced hunters try and fail miserably. Argo is a supreme being in this world, Alexander warned, a mixture of fear and admiration in his tone. Naruto snorted disdainfully. Yes, I understand. A man who thinks he's a god. But that doesn't matter now. Tell me where he is. It's to the south, on the outskirts of town, Alexander revealed with a wicked grin, as if he still had an ace up his sleeve. He seeks a subterranean passage, marked by a dead and rotting tree, an outcast among his leafy brethren. Naruto nodded, memorizing every detail. That should be enough, he said, as he held the popsicle to Alexander's back, eliciting another gasp. Naruto's laughter echoed through the room, a mixture of mockery and warning. Don't expect mercy next time, he warned, handcuffing Alexander to a metal table. If you try to escape, I assure you that you will regret it. With a theatrical gesture, Naruto lit flames on his fingers and proceeded to seal Alexander's aura, leaving him weak and vulnerable. What have you done? Exclaimed Alexander, his voice trembling with the sudden loss of power. The same as your secretary, so that he would make up his mind to speak, Naruto replied coldly. I have sealed your aura. Without looking back, Naruto made his way to the door, opening it with a fluid movement and signaling the others to follow. Naruto's departure marked the beginning of a new quest, one that would take them to the depths of the earth and truth. The air was charged with electricity, with possibilities and dangers. As Naruto and his team drifted into the night, Alexander's fate was sealed, his future uncertain. The search for Argo was about to begin. //. Nora couldn't contain her euphoria, her laughter echoing in the air, vibrant and contagious. Ha 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 ha. I can't believe it. That poor devil was terrified, screaming in fear and pain, a pain that shouldn't even exist. Rennie, did you see it? Wasn't it amazing? Ren nodded with a smile, his gaze shining with admiration at the cunning of the feat. Yes, it was awesome, I have to admit. It was very smart, he said, sharing Nora's enthusiasm. Kira watched the scene with a beaming smile, happiness in her eyes. Hiro, on the other hand, picked up the conversation with a stinging question. If you're capable of inflicting that kind of torture, why did you make Connor suffer like that? Naruto walked with a firm step and a serious expression, without a trace of joy. Each person is different, Hiro. You can't apply the same method to everyone. Connor has an iron will, much stronger than Alexander's. I couldn't limit myself to conventional torture with him, it would have been useless. I needed to break him physically. Kurama, with his deep and defiant voice, confronted Naruto. That's a vile lie, Naruto. You were so moved by that human's gaze that you didn't dare tear Alexander to pieces as he deserved. Hiro, with a mixture of curiosity and defiance, asked another question. Now what, brat, what's next? Naruto replied determinedly, his voice leaving no room for doubt. We're heading south in search of that damn tree, he declared. Night had already fallen, and darkness hung over them like a cloak. But it's dark, I think it's going to be tricky, Hiro objected, looking up at the night sky. Naruto smiled confidently, his eyes shining with a light of their own. I'm a fawn, and besides, that's what flashlights are for, he said, pulling a flashlight out of his backpack and turning it on, illuminating his path with a warm, firm light. //. Ren couldn't hide his surprise, his words welling up with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Wow, that was a lot faster than I imagined, he said, looking at the area with analytical eyes. Naruto, staring at the towering tree that stood before them, nodded. By my calculations, the base should be just below this colossus, or at least the entrance, he explained, and then called to his companion in a tone that betrayed urgency. Nora. With an enthusiasm that seemed to have no end, Nora responded instantly. Yes, he exclaimed, and without wasting a second, he raised his trusty weapon, Magniled, and smashed it to the ground near the tree. The metallic sound that followed echoed through the forest, like the echo of an ancient gong. Naruto, impatient and determined, didn't want to waste time on trivialities. There must be a cursed door around here, but I have no intention of looking for it, he muttered. With a fluid and precise movement, he infused his sword with wind chakra and plunged it into the earth, slicing a perfect square into the ground. Then, with a dexterity possessed only by himself, he drilled small holes in the piece of metal and, hooking his fingers into them, tore off the plate with a firm tug. Before them was revealed a dark passage that went deep into the earth. All right, here it is. Let's go in, Naruto said, his voice leaving no doubt about his decision. Hiro, ever wary, chimed in. Wait, kid. Don't you have some kind of plan or something? Naruto turned to him. His expression was serious, and his eyes reflected the gravity of the situation. I would have it if I had more information about this place. But since that's not the case, we'll go straight in and look for the subject. Or, if necessary, we'll drop bombs inside and let the structure collapse on top of it. I'm not going to risk the girls' lives, so we're going to have to put it on the line, he said with steely determination. //. The subterranean corridor gave off an ominous aura, with scattered torches casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Every step they took echoed in silence, and the tension was palpable. It seemed as if each tile could be the precursor to a death trap. The absence of a visible door only added to the feeling that they were stepping into the wolf's mouth. After a few minutes of tense walking, the runner forked in two opposite directions, creating a dilemma as old as time. Why are there always two damn entrances? Murmured Naruto, his voice tinged with exasperation and a hint of mission cliché weariness. Nora, with her characteristic energy, looked at her leader waiting for instructions. What do we do now? He asked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and anxiety for action. Naruto, always unpredictable in his methods, had a trick up his sleeve. Don't worry, I have a plan for these situations. With a theatrical gesture, he placed the tip of his sword on the ground and released the handle, allowing the katana to swing back and forth before falling to the right. The decision was made by chance, or so it seemed. Very well, I'll go there. The group's reaction was immediate and loud. It's utter nonsense, exclaimed Kiro, his voice rarely rising to such a volume. Naruto replied with a crooked smile. I know, It's silly, but sometimes fate plays with us in strange ways. Pyrrha, with a thoughtful look, interjected. Do you believe in fate, Naruto? Of course not. Naruto replied firmly. It is absurd to think that something like destiny controls our actions. No, I forge my own path. You four, he pointed to Kiro and the rest of the team, will go to the left. I will take this path. Let's investigate everything we can. If you run into Argo, take him out. If I meet the hostages, I will get them out of here. And if the situation is the other way around, do the same. Nora, with obvious concern for her leader, raised one last doubt. Wouldn't it be better if one of us came with you? Naruto reassured her with a confident look. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine, he assured, his tone making it clear that there was no room for debate. No, I implore you, cried a voice in the gloom. Track. The sound of a bone fracturing cut through the silence. Ha 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 ha. The same voice transformed into a piercing cry of pain. Observe well, even though you are shrouded in aura, your bones are not indestructible. You are not invulnerable, nor is your strength absolute, Naruto said in a voice that resonated with authority. With a swift and precise movement, he kicked the man's face, and he fell to the ground, unconscious. Naruto turned to look at the young ladies who filled the room. Their eyes reflected awe and fear, fearing what he might do to them. However, Naruto offered them a gentle and reassuring smile. Do not be afraid, I have come to set you free. Naira emerged from the group and threw herself into Naruto Uzumaki's arms. Naruto, my brave savior, I knew you would come for me. Happiness flooded Naruto's heart as he reunited with her. She was safe, and that was all that mattered. Despite the bruise on her left eye, Naira was in good shape. Naruto caressed her face tenderly, silently regretting that she had suffered because of him. That guilt would weigh on him forever. Always, to the farthest corner of the world, there would be no distance that would prevent me from seeing you. For Naruto, finding the girls had been a simple task. He ran down the hall with the speed of the wind, dodging every obstacle with ease. The guards guarding the place were no more than a minor nuisance, his pleas for mercy were lost in the echo of his defeat. Trust me, I'll take you to safety, he assured them. The girls nodded and followed him, trusting in his promise. The road to freedom was slower, for they did not run, they moved cautiously, guided by Naruto. Naira stood close to him, sheltered in his protective arms. Who is he, Naira? Wait, Naruto, is that really you? One of the girls asked in a trembling voice. It's been a long time, Miss Crystal, Naruto replied with a warm smile. A murmur of surprise spread among the girls. Is that him, Naruto Uzumaki? Asked another. Yes, it's him, several confirmed in unison. It's changed so much. He's become so handsome. Naruto felt his cheeks turn red at such praise. I wasn't used to being the center of attention like that. Please, girls, you make me blush, he said with a nervous laugh. They shared a light laugh and continued on their way, following the golden-haired young man. Climb these stairs and you will find the way to freedom. And what are you going to do, Naruto? Suddenly, a subtle vibration swept through the building, and Naruto's expression turned serious. I must track down the architect of this vileness and make sure he suffers the consequences of his actions, Naruto proclaimed in a voice imbued with firmness and a venom that made the air vibrate, sending a shiver even down Naira's spine. Moments before, Pyrrha, Ren, Nora, and Kiro were in a room of colossal dimensions. The room, bathed in immaculate whiteness, seemed to stretch to infinity. At its center stood a throne of polished stone, perhaps marble, that exuded an almost regal presence. On that throne sat a man whom they supposed to be Argo. His posture was that of a monarch indifferent to the commoners before him. What has delayed these fools? Surely, your interference, he said disdainfully, directing a piercing glance at the newcomers. Kiro, with a mocking smile adorning his countenance, replied sarcastically. Of course, your stratagem wasn't as cunning as you thought. Finding you was trivial, we just needed to follow the trail of your pawns. I understand, replied Argo, with an unsettling calm. He rose from his throne and approached them, reducing the distance to a mere 10 feet. Do you understand the magnitude of your mistake? You fools, you have condemned honorable men to an existence of mortality and suffering in this world. Save your pathetic villain laments. We have come to put an end to your reign of terror, Nora exclaimed, brandishing her magnild with determination. I hope you're ready to suffer some fractures. Your insolence is regrettable, but irrelevant. I'll teach you a lesson. You have thwarted my plans, so I will take your souls as compensation. After that, I'll be able to start over somewhere else. Argo clasped their hands, which began to glow with an ominous light. As they separated, a surge of aura flooded the room, covering every corner and forming a quadrangular dome that encapsulated everything. What have you done? Asked Kiro, placing a hand on his harbinger. A barrier. We don't want this shrine to fall apart, do we? The four of them went on the attack, but Argo dodged each attempt with supernatural grace. Ren launched a kick aimed at his temple, but Argo crouched down with cat-like agility. When Nora attempted to strike a blow to his abdomen with his hammer, Argo reinforced his belly with an additional layer of aura, absorbing the impact without suffering any damage. He dodged a slash from Kiro's sword and blocked Pyrrha's spear that sought his heart. The contest was fierce and balanced. With lightning speed, Argo threw a punch that connected with Ren's jaw, catapulting him into the air like a ragdoll. Then, with a flash of his aura, Argo materialized a grim claw, a solid projection that blew everyone away with its ability to shape the aura. In an instant, Argo lashed out at Nora, tearing through the air until it hit her thigh, forcing her to her knees in the intense pain. Kiro, in a desperate attempt, threw a slash at Argo, but stopped just in time, avoiding hurting Nora by millimeters. Argo didn't miss the opportunity and, with a well-aimed punch, hit Kiro's hip, sending him crashing into the corner of the room. Then, with a manifestation of cane-shaped aura, he slammed Nora's back, knocking her to the ground. Not content with that, he continued to punch her 3 more times, each blow accompanied by Nora's cries of pain. Pyrrha intervened bravely, brandishing her spear in a series of swift attacks. But Argo, with an almost supernatural elegance, dodged each one and seized the spear. Pyrrha attempted to transform her spear into a pistol, but Argo, with an aura of halo, froze the mechanism instead. Unarmed, Pyrrha could only watch as Argo spun around and delivered a devastating blow to her shoulder, sending her tumbling across the ground. Argo approached Nora with slow, calculated steps, placing his hand on her head. Nora's energy began to be drained, her aura flowing into Argo like a river into the sea. She was fighting with all her might, trying to free herself from his grip. The absorption of aura was abruptly interrupted when Argo felt an impact on his back, crashing into a powder cartridge. As he turned, he saw Ren, whose anger was palpable. With a burst of speed, Ren darted toward Argo, and the battle resumed with renewed ferocity. Kiro, recovering from his blow, joined Ren in the fight. In the distance, Pyrrha clutched her shoulder, pain evident in her expression. The blow had been brutal. Argo was not a mere religious fanatic, he was a formidable warrior. If the legends about their 300 years of life were true, then they were facing a being with centuries of combat experience, and it showed. Not even Kiro, with all his ability, seemed to be a match for him. But at the time, Kiro was his best chance, as only a hunter at his best could take on Argo on equal terms. With a quick twist of his wrist, Kiro transformed his weapon into a scythe, unleashing a deadly dance of precise slashes toward Argo. But Argo, with the cunning of a veteran, realized that these guys weren't just rookies, they were first-rate fighters, and Kiro. Well, Kiro was an outlier, a real heavyweight in the world of hunters. In a defensive move, Argo wrapped himself in samurai armor forged with translucent aura, a living fortress that deflected every onslaught from Kiro like nothing had happened. Suddenly, Argo had an epiphany. Enough games, he roared, raising both hands to conjure a circular dome of energy that rapidly expanded, forcing Kiro and Ren back. With a wave of his hands, Argo created thousands of stones, no bigger than marbles, and threw them like bullets. Kiro, with gravity-defying movements, dodged most of them, though some managed to brush him. Ren, on the other hand, was not so lucky. He was bombarded by the hail of stones, his aura flickering dangerously near collapse. Pyrrha took cover behind her shield, but Nora couldn't help but be hit by the rock storm. As the dust settled, Argo watched the figures of Kiro and the others emerge from the mist. A smug smile spread across his face. Awesome show, guys, really. I admit they're talented, but it's not enough to bring down this colossus. The only one who could make me sweat a little is Mr. Kiro, but he doesn't seem to be at his best, does he? He sneered with a wicked laugh. I see you trembling and agitated. Imbecile. Kiro, cursing silently, knew exactly what was wrong with him. Tremors, anxiety, were the symptoms of withdrawal. It had been an eternity since a whole day had passed in sobriety. It's time to get this over with, Argo declared, forming 4 aura blades ready to be thrown. But he stopped short when a shield flew toward his head. He nimbly dodged it, but to his surprise, the shield changed direction and hit him in the back of the head. Fortunately, his armor protected him from the impact. As he turned, he saw his attacker, the red-haired woman, rushing forward with her spear. Argo responded with an aura sword, and thus began a duel of titans. They seemed to be on equal footing, but Argo was analyzing every move. Fascinating, he muttered, realizing that the redhead's weapon changed direction with each attack. He then understood that she controlled his weapon at will, an ability that allowed him to manipulate objects from a distance. Tell me, telekinesis perhaps? No, that would be too obvious. You must have a trick up your sleeve. Metal, huh? Do you control magnetism or something like that? It's none of your business, she replied firmly, and without further ado, fired her rifle. The bullets, useless against Argo's armor, ricocheted like pebbles. I think it's time to put an end to this charade, Argo muttered. Suddenly, Aura tentacles emerged from the ground and coiled around Pyrrha and the others, dragging them to the ground with unrelenting force. Immobilized, they felt their vital energies fade away, their auras being drained by those parasitic tentacles. Well, guys, that's it. It's been entertaining, Argo said, approaching with a slowness that betrayed his complete control of the situation. Who are you really? Ren managed to articulate, his voice barely a whisper. Argo stopped, nearly touching Pyrrha with the intention of absorbing her life energy, but chose to respond. I've already told you my name, I'm Argo. But who are you, really? Hiro insisted, seeking to understand the enemy they faced. I was a court knight in a forgotten kingdom of Void, known back then as the Archon. That's a bunch of rubbish, exclaimed Hiro incredulously. Believe what you will, but it's the truth, Argo continued calmly. In those days, the world was disconnected, desolate. Surviving was a daily challenge. The Grimm laid siege to the realms relentlessly, and only a lucky few with access to the aura could defend themselves. I have been blessed with this gift. I discovered it at a critical moment when the Grimms raided my home. After the fall of the Archon realm, I wandered this world, and my likeness has allowed me to live beyond the natural. By absorbing the souls of others, I have prolonged my existence. Because I am a god on this earth, I was born to live off the fruits of its people, so that they may serve me as the servants they are, Argo proclaimed with a conviction that chilled the blood. You're completely crazy, cried Nora, her voice full of frustration and rage. No, I'm not crazy. The insane are those who refuse to submit to my will, Argo replied, his face impassive and authoritative. But then, his expression cracked, his lips curled into a grimace, and a mocking laugh escaped his lips. Ha ha ha, Biome, what nonsense. Many have fallen for my deceptions. Give them eternal life. No, that's a fairy tale. I can prolong their days, yes, but in the end, their souls will be consumed and I will always come out on top, Argo revealed disdainfully. Then the whole ritual is a lie, cried Pyrrha, her voice echoing with the force of despair. Exactly, it's a hoax. I could do it any month of the year, I just need to do it every 30 years, Argo confessed coldly. And what about the young women born in September? Asked Ren, trying to make sense of the madness. One more fallacy to the collection. Any soul is useful to me, although I must admit that the latest souls have an incomparable delight, said Argo, resuming his walk with a macabre smile that outlined his face. The creaking of a door interrupted the silence. The entrance was revealed once more, and through it, the figure of a golden-haired young man was revealed, staring at Argo with a serene, almost indifferent gaze. Their attention, however, seemed to be divided between the man and the dome that towered majestically above them, embracing every corner of the room. His fingers brushed the ethereal walls with a mixture of wonder and curiosity. Naruto, with a nonchalant gesture, drummed on the translucent surface of the aura and shrugged his shoulders indolently. From the depths of his pocket, he drew a scroll adorned with arcane inscriptions. Argo looked at the boy with an analytical gaze. Is he one of yours? He asked, addressing the group, and Pyrrha nodded solemnly. He's the leader of our entourage. Interesting, maybe I should offer you some advice then. Young man, you should leave this place. There's no need for you to get involved in these matters, Argo advised in a tone that bordered on warning. Naruto ignored her words and applied the scroll to the aura barrier, as naturally as one adheres a decal to a smooth surface, and then, the unthinkable happened. Argo watched, incredulous. The only chance of such an event occurring would be the total annihilation of the aura barrier, an almost impossible feat given the strength of its energy. However, the paper began to crack the wall, slowly disintegrating it into a quadrangular opening, wide enough for the young man to pass through. And with enviable calmness, Naruto did so, advancing with a sure step towards where Argo was waiting. Naruto's gaze was as carefree and humorous as Argo's, and he had his hands in his pockets, denoting a nonchalance that contrasted with the gravity of the moment. So you're Argo. You look like you're in good shape for a 300-year-old. I appreciate the compliment, replied Argo, accepting the politeness though it was evidently a fallacy, yet he did not perceive it. And you must be. Oh, excuse my rudeness, Naruto interrupted with an expression of surprise and clearly theatrical remorse. I've forgotten about the formalities. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I am the leader of this group, except for that gentleman. He's my mentor, so to speak. A heavy silence fell over the group. Neither Pyrrha nor the others attempted to intervene or give Naruto advice. Everyone was on tenterhooks, expectant of the tension that was chewing in the air. I suppose it would be useless to ask you to get out of here, wouldn't it? Asked Argo, keeping his manners. Exactly. I'm sorry to tell you that I can't let you go. So please accept my apologies, sir. No problem, but you'll also have to excuse me if I don't submit to this arrest so easily. Arrest? What are you talking about, sir? Asked Naruto, genuinely confused. Argo was equally perplexed, unable to decipher the riddle in Naruto's words. He watched as the young ninja calmly drew his sword and aimed it at him. There is no arrest here, no courtroom waiting for you, no judge to convict you. There is only me, the blade of my sword, and the death that stalks you. Argo couldn't help but smile arrogantly. That remains to be seen, boy. With that provocation, Argo lunged towards Naruto with astonishing speed. He was about to land a direct blow to his face, enough to fracture his nose, but Naruto, with a quick movement, punched him in the chest. To someone of his caliber, it should have been nothing more than a scrape, but to his astonishment, his armor cracked like glass. Argo spat out blood and his body slammed into the wall in the corner. With years of battles behind him, Argo ignored the pain and narrowly dodged a sword that sought his neck. He created distance and recoiled, his mind alarmed. How is it possible? How could a single blow damage my body like this? My aura didn't resist for a second. Argo was bewildered. You look lost, huh, like you barely remember what it feels like to be hurt. Don't worry, I'll refresh your memory, Naruto said with a cold smile. Argo frowned, annoyed. How dare this insolent man try to make him feel powerless again? He pounced on Naruto once more, and this time, the combat was hand to hand. Argo attempted to land a series of quick and precise blows to Naruto's shoulder, abdomen, chest, and head, but to no avail. Naruto blocked them all with impressive skill and, taking advantage of a moment of distraction, grabbed Argo's hand and twisted his fingers until they were almost fractured. Ha! Cried Argo, overcome with pain. Naruto freed Argo and, with a fluid and precise movement, landed him a well-aimed blow to the face. Argo, driven by a primal instinct, conjured an aura mask that materialized covering his countenance. Despite the overflowing energy he poured into his creation, he was catapulted through the air, sliding across the ground like a leaf blown by the autumn wind. His face, protected by the mask, remained almost unchanged, but a faint and persistent sensation of pain was present. At that critical moment, Argo summoned Aura's tentacles, which emerged like serpents from the abyss, and coiled around Naruto's feet. However, he was greatly surprised when the young Uzumaki showed no sign of disturbance. With a gesture as natural as the flight of a bird, Naruto swung his sword and slashed the tentacles with a single, graceful slash. Argo was dumbfounded. His aura, vast as an endless ocean, fed by countless devoured souls, should have made those tentacles so robust that not even a dozen hunters could break them. But the golden-haired young man made it seem trivial. Damn! Cried Argo, and in the twinkling of an eye a horde of Grimm materialized before them. From Beowulfs to creeps, to Barangels and other abominations that had never crossed their paths. Nightmarish creatures they've never faced in battle before. Naruto's composure remained unwavering. With a smile that defied the gravity of the situation, he drew his pistol and loaded it with powder cartridges. Thus began a macabre dance between a man and Grimm's grim constructions. Naruto, with the grace of a dancer, dodged the clutches of a Beowulf and, with an accurate shot to the head, reduced it to mere particles of dust. He continued his deadly dance, annihilating most until only one Goliath remained. The beast tried to crush him with its huge paws, but Naruto, agile as the wind, evaded it. He fired his gun, but the bullets barely grazed the monster. The Grimms of that lineage were known for their supernatural resilience. Naruto, then, infused his sword with a futon chakra more potent than ever. He transformed it into a spear of wind and, with a movement that cut through the air, pierced the Goliath's skull, ending its existence in an instant. Argo, incredulous, watched the scene unfold before his eyes. That young man was cornering him, putting him in a desperate situation. It couldn't be possible. Only a warrior with decades of combat experience could face him on an equal footing, and he knew only two beings capable of such a feat. An old mage, weathered by the years, and a sorceress from the Dark Lands. What kind of witchcraft is this? It doesn't make sense. How old is this boy? He shouldn't possess such mastery, Argo muttered, bewildered. How much do you babble? Asked Naruto, his voice imbued with unwavering authority. Hearing that voice, he turned around quickly. He attempted to form an aura sword, but was intercepted by the golden-haired youth's steady hand. With a determined gesture, Naruto pressed the hilt of the sword and fractured it, causing Argo to quickly retreat. The situation was alarming, a harbinger of a storm on the horizon. You're a fool, boy. With your power, you could have freed your comrades and perhaps you would have defeated me in advance, Argo snapped. Naruto, nonchalantly, wiped his left ear, his finger moving listlessly. His gaze, though full of boredom, flashed with a malicious gleam. Don't worry. In fact, I prefer this scenario. Because, honestly, I'm not like the hunters you've faced before. They tried to assist you, they took your case to court so that you would pay for your misdeeds. I'm not like those dupes. Beings like you only deserve death, Naruto proclaimed coldly. Well, it doesn't matter, Argo said, and suddenly, a chorus of shouts filled the air. Argo was absorbing their auras. Ha! They will nourish me, he exclaimed as Naruto remained motionless, a statue in the midst of the chaos. Won't you intervene to save them? Of course not. You can't usurp their souls without direct contact. All you do is drain their life energy. Go on, it's irrelevant. You will only postpone your end. A few more seconds, Naruto replied serenely. Argo was flooded with euphoria. These young men, in addition to being skilled in combat, possessed reserves of aura greater than any I had ever known. What kind of warriors were they? In unbridled rage, Argo lunged at Naruto, but with supernatural agility, the Uzumaki dodged him and, with a well-aimed blow, amputated his left arm. Jaha. Astonishment was painted on everyone's faces, even Kiro's. Despite having witnessed countless deaths, he never imagined that a young man like Naruto would dismember someone with such nonchalance. Ha! It seems that even gods can bleed. Who would have thought? Muttered Naruto, raising his sword and directing it towards Argo's neck with the intention of ending his life. Argo, with withering reflexes, conjured an aura shield of extraordinary density, so robust that even Naruto's futon chakra struggled to leave a mark. Argo concentrated a large amount of aura on his wound, stopping the bleeding. He gasped, consumed by sensations he hadn't felt in eons, pain and terror. Do you think that shield will protect you from me? I'm afraid you're wrong. At that moment, Naruto tore through Aura's barrier and Argo had to dodge urgently, as the blade was one step away from splitting his skull in two. Argo, consumed by despair, rushed towards the exit, yearning for freedom, but Naruto, with the precision of a predator, intercepted him and slashed him in the thigh, rendering his leg useless. Son of a bitch! He could barely articulate Argo before Naruto silenced him with a well-aimed blow to the windpipe. Your verbiage has become tedious. You're nothing but a curse pit, Naruto said disdainfully, kicking him in the belly that sent him bouncing to the ground. Argo was trying to catch his breath, coughing and struggling to speak. The time has come to put an end to this game. It's been a passing entertainment, Lord of the 300 years, Naruto declared with a mocking smile. Enough, cried Argo, exhausted from the fight. His body began to radiate an intense light, his skin turned a phosphorescent neon, and he threw a devastating hook towards Naruto's jaw. Argo's speed was blistering, and Naruto, taken by surprise, crashed into the wall. Naruto slowly stood up, surprise still reflected on his face. He dodged another attack from Argo, which threatened to pulverize his skull with the force of the impact. The wall behind Naruto cracked, forming a crater. Naruto continued to dodge Argo's punches, aware that if any of them connected, it could be fatal. But that would only be a problem if he allowed it. You don't have fun anymore, do you? Where's that arrogance? Where's that indifference that adorned your face? Shouted Argo, defiantly. Naruto remained silent, allowing Argo's attacks to pass by him untouched. Argo threw a horizontal kick, but Naruto slipped under his guard and appeared behind him. Suddenly, Naruto's sword emerged from Argo's abdomen. He was stunned. How had it happened? His skin, his last and most powerful defense, had been pierced like paper. And then he noticed something peculiar about the leaf, a thin layer of electricity. Calmly, Naruto withdrew his sword from Argo's belly, who fell to his knees, clutching his stomach. Argo's skin returned to its normal state. Naruto circled him and, with his hand, raised Argo's face so that their eyes met. And just like that, Argo saw Naruto Uzumaki's face. Serious, but with a subtle smile that betrayed amusement. Behold my countenance, Argo. For a fleeting moment, amusement took over me. My heart was pounding, and yes, it was exciting. Your attack was strong, I felt it in my being. Your maneuvers and techniques inflicted wounds. I am grateful. You gave me a fight worth remembering, if only for a moment. But that's all, Naruto uttered, raising his sword solemnly, prepared for the final act. However, his movement was interrupted when Kiro lunged at him, pinning him to the ground. What the hell, Kiro? Exclaimed Naruto, furious. The climax of his victory over Argo had been snatched from him. No, what the hell is wrong with you, boy? Do you intend to assassinate him? Of course, I'm going to kill this wretch. So back up now. I won't. This is not correct. It's not our way of proceeding. Oh, please, Kiro, don't start with that nonsense. We both know what a hunter is capable of. Now, back off or I'll be forced to cut off that damn hand. Naruto, Pira interjected, approaching cautiously. Enough is enough. Your opponent is already defeated. There's no need to continue. Naruto gritted his teeth in frustration. He despised that absurd morality which hunters seem to revere. Why didn't they understand that an enemy had to be eliminated without delay? Otherwise, they risked it coming back stronger. And maybe next time they wouldn't be so lucky to stop it. With a nimble movement, Naruto got rid of Kiro's grip, but Ren grabbed him by the neck with a pinning technique. Let go of me, Ren, Naruto demanded calmly, though his voice contained a clear warning. I won't, Naruto. This is over. A well-aimed elbow to the ribs left Ren breathless. The pressure of his grip lessened and Naruto broke free. He advanced toward Argo with determination, but a forceful blow to his left foot brought him to his knees. In the heat of battle, Nora took advantage of an oversight to subdue her opponent with a master key, pinning him down with the precision of an experienced hunter. I implore you, Nora, Naruto pleaded, his voice a whisper of calm in the midst of the storm, though the patience he had held like a shield was beginning to crack. Release me now. It's an order. No, Naruto. Enough is enough, Nora replied firmly, her gaze a reflection of the determination that burned inside her. Why do you persist in this madness? Enough is enough, Naruto. Frustration gripped him. Naruto was repulsed by the idea of raising his voice against his comrades, but there were times, like this, when he had to harden his heart and be relentless. Enough of this, he exclaimed, freeing himself from the key with a jerk and grabbing Nora by the shirt. How naive can you be, Nora? As a hunter, don't you understand that the day will come when you will have to decide between one life or another? But he's already been defeated, cried Nora, facing her leader, their faces so close that their breaths intertwined. He has surrendered, there is no reason to continue this conflict. You haven't given in. Naruto pointed at Argo with an accusing gesture. If we lock him up, he will find a way to escape and resume his sinister game, attacking the innocent, devouring their existence. It's a vicious cycle, Nora. We capture a deranged man and, after his release, they go back to their ways. Don't come to me with those excuses, Naruto. You're not acting out of justice or doing the right thing. You do it out of anger. Because he captured Naira, he hurt her. That's the real reason for your fury. And don't forget that it was you who put her in danger. Naruto cracked a smile, a mask of indifference to Nora's accusations. He knew he was responsible, and that guilt weighed heavily on him. That's irrelevant, Nora. Whether it's Naira or anyone else, that monster deserves death. Are you looking for me to be tormented by guilt? Unfortunately for you, that won't stop the inevitable. With a gesture of disdain, Naruto let go of Nora and walked away. He approached Argo, but the sound of guns being armed stopped him. Without needing to look back, he knew that everyone was pointing towards him. This is absurd, comrades. Put down your weapons. I am not his adversary. Argo, still laughing, wouldn't let the pain quell his biting mood. Unbelievable, they've got you pinned down, boy, like a dog. Despite your power, you submit to the rules of this world. You are a caged bird, a prisoner of your own chains. You should be the sovereign of the. Before he could finish, Nora silenced him with a well-aimed blow from her sledgehammer, and Argo fell to the ground, unconscious. They all turned to Nora, who frowned, issued a warning. Be silent, you fool. Don't waste your only chance to survive. A collective sigh rose between them, except for Naruto, whose gaze was lost in Argo's body. Hiro placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, trying to convey some calm. You should temper that temper, kid man. It's not good to get carried away by anger. Naruto looked at him, confused, as if Hiro's words were an enigma. What are you talking about, Hiro? I'm not upset. Do you think I acted impulsively? No, I understand now that it wasn't, Hiro replied, his voice tinged with seriousness. Naruto fixed his gaze on Argo again, still lying on the ground. You know I should have deleted it. I know, brat, but this wasn't the right time, Hiro said, pointing to the others. You're right, that wasn't the time. The morning had been somewhat tense for the others, but for Naruto, it was just another day. Hiro also seemed indifferent. Blood and torture were not new to him. It was one thing to inflict pain and wounds on an enemy, but quite another to do so in front of young men who had barely scratched the surface of such horrors. Perhaps some had seen death up close, but actively participating in it was another level of experience. When they returned to the village, they were greeted as heroes. Connor and the mayor weren't ready to testify, but nothing needed to be said. Naruto presented a vanquished Argo, and that was enough for his accomplices to fall like dominoes. They had plans to leave the next morning, but the people insisted on holding a feast in their honor. They could not refuse such a show of gratitude. The party was a success, and Hiro, in particular, was thrilled to have an excuse to drink without worrying about the bill. Naruto and his team felt out of place, but he didn't let that get to him. His smile and pleasant chat with Naira were constant. The next morning, tension still hung in the air, but Hiro decided to stay out of it. Team Rubio's problems weren't his. That morning, they were having breakfast with Naira's parents, who was smiling radiantly. Come on, Naruto. Say, eh, she encouraged. Naruto obeyed and opened his mouth, letting the delicious morsel in. He loved the food she prepared. It's exquisite, but I think I've had enough, Naruto said. Just one more, Naruto, Naira insisted. Naruto tried to refuse, but was unable to refuse. Okay, one more. She offered him another piece of cake and Naruto devoured it. He loved that girl, but even for him, this was too much. Naruto, though uncomfortable with attention, couldn't help but feel at home. Naira's laughter was like music to him, and although the discomfort of the previous morning still lingered, the warmth of the family and the home-cooked food made it all worth it. From the other end of the table, Hiro watched with a piercing gaze the interaction between Naruto and Naira. Despite his apparent disinterest, his eyes flashed with a glimmer of approval. I was aware that, beyond the challenges and conflicts, it was these small moments that really mattered. Naruto, Pira interjected seriously, we need to talk. Naruto, still chewing, nodded. After swallowing, he replied, of course, no problem. We'll do it later. No, it has to be now. Pira, I think it's a little. Now, she insisted, almost raising her voice. Naira, perceiving the seriousness of the matter, looked for an excuse to withdraw. I think I forgot to buy provisions for the week, he said, excusing himself. And I have to serve a client, Carlos added, also looking for a way out. I'll go check the plants, Marta excused herself. Hiro, the only one who remained motionless, received a direct look from Naruto. With an equally serious expression, you should go too, Hiro. You don't need to be here for this. It's all right, no problem, he said, getting up with feigned annoyance. I know when I'm not welcome. And with that, he walked away from the dining room. I know where this is going, so be frank with me, Naruto said. Naruto, we love you very much, you know that, don't you? Said Ren. I know, but hearing it from you doesn't comfort me. Go to hell, Ren replied with a wry smile. You are an exceptional leader, Nora added, an amazing person who is always there for us. Okay, guys, I think I've made that clear. Don't beat around the bush. What are they worried about? We're worried about you, Pira confessed with a look that denoted a mixture of respect and concern. We have debated this ad nauseum. You are incredibly competent and certainly the most capable leader we could ever have, but the lessons you impart to us. Honestly, they make me wonder what kind of experiences you've had in life. Explain yourselves, please, Naruto demanded, his voice calm but firm. For starters, the use of traps, Ren interjected with a disapproving gesture. I don't see anything wrong with setting the stage in our favor. It's pure strategy, Naruto replied with a sly smile. Then there's the matter of poisons, Nora added, frowning. It's a question of efficiency. Why wear yourself out in hand-to-hand combat when you can solve it with a small dose of poison? Argued Naruto, his relentless logic. And let's not forget the training to target vital organs, Pira said, her tone serious and her gaze direct. We'll face more than just grim in our lives. It is essential to be prepared for any eventuality. I think I was pretty clear about it that day, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for doubt. We absolutely refuse to adopt those tactics that you have tried to instill in us, Ren declared firmly. Naruto, we need to understand, what made you like this? Naruto adopts a neutral expression, almost as if his face were a mask. Are you afraid of me? He asked calmly. There was a pause, a brief moment of uncertainty, but they shook their heads. That hesitation. I don't blame them. It's natural to have reservations about my methods, but there's something you need to understand very well, and that won't change, regardless of whether you hate me or love me. No matter what happens, I will always be there for you. So, whether they fear me, despise me, hate me, or feel love, friendship, pride, or familiarity toward me, my commitment will not waver. You can always count on my support. What happened last night is an example of. Naruto pondered inwardly. Their mentality exasperates me. It irritates me to the limit. All this idealism about bringing wrongdoers to justice, about being people of integrity, about always looking out for the good of all over you. These are not erroneous notions, but they are, to some extent, naive and regrettable. Although, of course, I can't express this openly. It's an area I need to improve on. My life hasn't been easy, and to be frank, I've learned that forgiving certain people is a mistake. If you give them the opportunity to continue their misdeeds, sooner or later they will turn on you and destroy you, he said, touching his chest unconsciously, as if evoking a painful memory. And honestly, I don't want that history to repeat itself. I wouldn't tolerate it. I apologize if I have caused you fear. Please forgive me. I assure you that it will not happen again. Naruto, with his head down and his eyes fixed on the table, looked like a statue of regret. I never wanted them to be afraid of me. I beg your pardon. It won't happen again. Pira, with a smile that couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes, replied. Your life has been a thorny road, hasn't it? You know that. It's not something I like to talk about, Naruto said, avoiding his gaze. But there are so many things that you still keep silent, Naruto. You've carried a lot of pain, haven't you? That stage of loneliness and helplessness is behind us. Now you're strong. You've got friends. You've got me. You don't need to keep putting barriers between you and the world. You can be yourself with us. Pira stood up and approached Naruto with smooth, measured steps. Naruto was still sitting, his gaze fixed on her, a mixture of confusion and something else he couldn't decipher. I think I know what you mean, he finally said. Then get up, Pyrrha urged. I don't see the case, Naruto replied, still motionless. Get up, she demanded more forcefully, and Naruto obeyed, standing up with a rigidity that was uncharacteristic of him. Pyrrha smiled tenderly at him and wrapped him in a hug that seemed to want to erase all the wounds of the past. She was taller than him, which made the gesture seem even more protective. Naruto felt small, vulnerable, but somehow, he was fine. Pyrrha stroked her hair gently, whispering words of comfort. Naruto Uzumaki, you don't have to go down that lonely path. I don't like to see you turned into someone we don't recognize, someone who hides behind a mask of indifference, who seems to enjoy the pain of others. That's not you. Promise me that you will find another way to face your battles. Pyrrha, Naruto stammered, struggling to find the words. Promise me, Naruto. I can't stand to see you like this. It hurts my soul. I'll do my best to change, Pyrrha. I will strive to be better. Pyrrha nodded, her smile a sweet reflection of the complexity of her emotions. Naruto hadn't sealed his promise with firm words, but his gesture was a start, and Pyrrha was willing to accept that first step. That's all I expect from you, Naruto. By the way, Pyrrha, you smell amazing. Have you ever used my shampoo again? Asked Naruto with feigned innocence. Pyrrha, surprised and a little embarrassed, gently pushed him away before quickly exiting the door. Looks like I can still get a smile out of him, Naruto commented to himself with a mischievous grin. Ren and Nora exchanged a knowing look. Nora's smile was so wide that it seemed to light up the room. What's going on here? Asked Naruto, noticing the playful atmosphere. Nothing at all, Ren replied with a smile that barely appeared on his face. As they walked away through the door, following in Pyrrha's footsteps, Naruto was perplexed. Wait, what's so funny? What Naruto hadn't noticed, or maybe didn't want to admit, was that the blush on his cheeks was as evident as the sun at noon. Pyrrha's embrace had left a deeper impression than he expected. Being in his arms had been comforting, a new and pleasant feeling that he didn't want to acknowledge out loud. Hey, answer me, what are you laughing at so much? // Come on team. The bullhead is here. Time to fly, exclaimed Kira with a mixture of relief and urgency. Yes, they all murmured, shuffling their feet and with a hint of sadness in their voices. It seems that this place stole their hearts, huh? They wanted to stay and sunbathe a little longer, said Nora, with a mischievous smile that lit up her face. Hiro's attention was diverted to his captive. How about our friend the charlatan? He asked with a playful twinkle in his eye. Argo was more tied up than a Christmas package, with a straitjacket that covered him from head to toe and a muzzle that closed his mouth. He couldn't move, talk, or even snap his fingers. Thanks to Naruto, who had blocked his aura, Argo was so devoid of powers that he couldn't even raise an eyebrow. It's calmer than a calm lagoon, Naruto replied with a smile. The boy is a charmer when he takes a break from his endless monologue. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed in the distance. It was Naira, who was running towards them as if she were participating in a marathon. Naruto quickly said goodbye to Carlos and Marta, while Naira, who had gone shopping for the month, hadn't even had time for a goodbye. He had asked his parents to pass on his farewell. Ruto, why didn't you wait for me? She gasped, her breath ragged with the race. I'm sorry, we had to leave at dawn. I didn't want to be rude, Naruto apologized, with a gesture of genuine concern. Don't worry, I understand. But I'm glad to be able to say goodbye to you. I hope you'll come back soon. I'll be back, sooner rather than later. I'll count the days until our reunion, Naruto promised, with a smile that couldn't hide the melancholy in his eyes. She smiled back with one that could light up the entire valley. Naruto looked away, not out of embarrassment, but because deep down, this farewell weighed on him more than he wanted to admit. Listen, Naira, he began, with a seriousness he seldom showed. There's something I need to tell you. Yes, she asked, with a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. You see, it's just that. / Pam. Collision. The sound echoed through the air, but the blow was more of a graze than an impact. Although, of course, getting hit by the person you love isn't exactly a relaxing massage. Pam. Collision. Another attempted punch, this time on the cheek, and Naruto remained impassive, as if he were a monk in meditation. Yes, I deserve it. You're absolutely right, Naruto said, accepting each blow as if it were a self-inflicted punishment. Naira, frustration painted on her face, kicked him in the knee, but Naruto only nodded. I deserve that, too. Hit me if it makes you feel better. Naira, with a trembling fist, hit Naruto's abdomen, who was hit without defending himself. Yes, I deserve that too. Pyrrha, her heart in her hand, tried to intervene, but Ren held her gently. He knew that this was a duel that Naruto had to face alone. Naira, exhausted from so much banging without getting a response, finally burst out, "You're a complete idiot." She yelled at Naruto, tears threatening to escape her eyes. "I know. It was unforgivable to put your safety at risk," Naruto admitted, with a sincerity that hurt. She wanted to be furious, she wanted to hate him, but it was Naruto. And hating Naruto was like trying to get mad at a puppy for biting your shoes. "I understand your intentions. I understand why you did it. You're like that, Naruto. Always acting alone, not caring about the consequences. You don't care if everyone hates you in the end, as long as everyone else is safe, you'd do anything. And that's what I hate most about you. Why do you always have to be the hero? Why do you hurt yourself like this?" exclaimed Naira, a sob that cut through her soul. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to. I didn't mean to hurt you," Naruto stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Enough is enough. I don't want your apologies. For heaven's sake, I had never seen Naira like this. It's so anticlimactic," Naruto thought. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside. He lunged at Naruto, not intending to hit him, but with an act that no one, not even Kiro, expected. Instead of a punch, what followed was a passionate kiss. Their lips met in a frenzied dance, an exchange of promises and regrets. When they finally parted from shortness of breath, Naira looked at Naruto, her cheeks a canvas of blush. "If you do something so reckless again, I swear I'll leave this town just to teach you a lesson. Consider this a warning, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto, dazed and disoriented by the intensity of the moment, could only articulate, "Wow." Then, regaining some composure, he added, "Yes, miss." He stood his ground and saluted with military respect. Naira, with a wicked smile, turned and fled the scene, unable to handle the embarrassment that flooded her. A hand landed on Naruto's shoulder, and as he turned, he saw Kiro, who offered him a thumbs-up nod of approval. Naruto smiled proudly, feeling as if he had reached the top of the world. With a silent affirmation, he nodded, knowing that this was just the beginning of many more adventures and challenges to come. Naruto, with a smile that didn't fit on his face, sang a tune that spoke of love and possession, but the atmosphere was not for celebrations. Ren and Nora, as if in a minefield, kept a safe distance from Pyrrha, whose aura had grown darker than a starless night. And there was Naruto, singing merrily, oblivious to the tension that was chewing in the air. "Wow, that was epic!" exclaimed Naruto, pulling a canteen from his jacket and tossing it to Kiro like a bridal bouquet. Kiro caught her on the fly, a look of confusion across his face. "What is this?" he asked, looking at the object as if it were an alien artifact. "It's your canteen, old man. Didn't you miss her?" replied Naruto with a mischievous smile. "But I thought you had sworn to keep me sober during the mission," Kiro replied, still perplexed. "The mission is now history, and we have emerged victorious. I think you've earned a good drink," Naruto said, patting Kiro on the back. Kiro laughed. "You seem to be in the clouds, boy." "Oh, I'm more than in the clouds. How can I say it? Over the moon," crooned Naruto, doing a little victory dance. The ship, as if to join in the celebration, began to dance to the rhythm of an unexpected turbulence. Everyone except the carefree Naruto exchanged glances, knowing full well the cause of the turmoil. "Are we being attacked by the Grims?" asked Naruto, looking out the window for monsters. "No, not exactly. Let's say it's emotional turbulence," Kiro replied, casting a wary glance at Pyrrha. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and, touching his lips, smiled with a mixture of pride and happiness. "Well done, Naruto. You've outdone yourself," he congratulated himself quietly. The ship, however, seemed to have other plans and began to shake harder. "I don't like this anymore. What the hell is going on now?" murmured Naruto, holding on to a seat. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it," Nora said, getting up with determination and heading for the cockpit. "I'm going with you," Ren added quickly, taking the opportunity to get away from the furious Pyrrha. Naruto was left alone, watching as his friends walked away to solve the mystery of the quaking ship. "Well, I'm sure they'll fix it in the blink of an eye," he said optimistically. He turned his attention to Pyrrha, whose presence was like a beacon in the gloom. "Pyrrha, you know what? And when?" he started, but she interrupted him with a snort that cut his words like a knife. Naruto blinked, confused by the reaction, and slipped to the redhead's side with the softness of a shadow. "Pyrrha, what's wrong? Are you okay?" he asked in a voice tinged with concern. She turned her head, emitting another snort, as if she were a wild cat instead of the warrior everyone knew. "What's bothering you? Discomfort? Dizziness? Or is it hunger that makes you growl like that?" asked Naruto, as he rummaged through his backpack like someone looking for a hidden treasure. He pulled out a small container and opened it with a theatrical gesture, revealing cinnamon rolls that gave off a scent of home and simpler times. "They're cinnamon rolls, your favorite," she announced with a smile that was meant to be contagious. Pyrrha, however, stood motionless, ignoring both the offer and the offerer. Naruto let out a sigh that seemed to take some of his energy with it. I know you have your pride, but there's no reason to deprive yourself, he said, extending a scroll to Pyrrha's sealed lips. She showed no signs of relenting, keeping her mouth shut like a fortress. Pyrrha, I know you want them. Let's go, Naruto insisted, with the patience of a Zen master. Finally, she relented, opening her lips to take a timid bite at the offered candy. That's it, Naruto said, stroking his head with the tenderness of an older brother. Pyrrha relaxed her muscles and walked over to him, seeking comfort in his presence. Come here, there's nothing to worry about. Naruto continued to feed her with the delicacy of one who cares for a fragile creature. That's right, Pyrrha. It seems that hunger was stronger than your pride. Do not be afraid, I am here to take care of you, my warrior princess. And as suddenly as it had begun, the ship quieted down, as if it had found peace in the stillness of the scene. Oh, it looks like it was just technical issues, Naruto commented, with a light laugh. Of course, Hiro interjected, taking a sip from his canteen. I'm too old for this.